Oh, it is that time again of the month. You know what I'm talking about. It is your Sovereign Tech Patreon only Star Wars update. And no matter what's going on in Star Wars, this is always one of my favorite times of the month because I get to hang out with one of my dear friends, that being Robin Freebeard. Robin, man, welcome to the show.
Snuggle bum, oogie woogie.
Woo! I'll tell you, actually, I don't know. I'm feeling. I know we sometimes we talk about this at the end. Sometimes we talk about this at the beginning. But I'm feeling pretty good about Star Wars right now.
Yeah.
Despite a lot of things, I'm feeling actually, and one of our lead stories is really going to point at part of why I'm feeling a little more hopeful going forward, going years down the line. And I think it's actually going to be something that's going to end up proving a theory you've brought up on this show over the past few months correct and right. But before we do that, I do want to got to give out an honorable mention, maybe even dedicate the show to Gary Kurtz, who passed away this week. Very, very important part of certainly of A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. He was the producer for both of those movies, walked away from Return of the Jedi. That's a long story, but died at the age of 78 and of cancer, unfortunately, a battle with cancer. And just one of the legends in Hollywood, really. I mean, not just Star Wars. I mean, Dark Crystal, one of my favorite movies. Like a bunch of films. I mean, this guy was really something. What do you got to say about Gary Kurtz there, Rob?
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, I really feel like he, like so many other people, like Marshall Lucas, was an unsung hero of Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and credit to a guy, I mean, I don't know how much I want to get into it, like with Return of the Jedi, because I want to respect. I mean, I really respect the guy's decision to walk away. He didn't like the Ewoks, apparently. There was a bunch of this other stuff that he disagreed with. I mean, you really got to respect a guy that says no to George Lucas. Now, I know in Return of the Jedi he wasn't the only one, because originally, like, Lucas wanted that ending where Luke was going to put on Vader's mask at the end, which I think that would have been fucking epic. But and people had to say no to him, to Lucas about that. But I got to respect, Gary Kurtz for really, sticking to his guns throughout that. I mean, to walk away from, such easy money and such a guaranteed franchise. I mean, that's really an impressive thing. And obviously he did a much better job than Rick McCallum, but
yeah, so. I would get, yeah, absolutely. I think he probably, Kurtz is probably one of the best executive producers that Star Wars has ever had.
Sure.
And certainly, like you said, being able to stand up to George provided, I think, a lot of the strengths for the original trilogy, for especially, the first two movies. And yeah, that's something that I feel that it was lacking after Return of the Jedi.
Right.
Is because, you even look at some of the behind the scenes stuff for episode 1, and everybody treats George as sort of like this mythological, figure.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand it, because I respect and love the hell out of the guy too.
Yeah,
but
same.
You don't want to surround yourself with those kind of people when you're in a creative environment.
Oh, absolutely. I have certain people, not obviously Sovereign Tech's not at the level of Star Wars by even a long shot, not even a smidge, but I have people that I ask, hey, how do you think about this? Did I go too far, et cetera, et cetera? And they, they're always there with feedback. And if they say something goes too far, I listen to them. I know some people might believe that I don't, but I do. And yeah, it is important to have people who can give you a bit of a reality check on what's going on. And I think Gary, again, so, certainly the legend of Gary Kurtz, I mean, his creative prowess and so on, and what he brought to the business is going to be missed. But just wanted to mention that at the beginning of the show. Which I think actually leads into really our first story, because talk about sometimes you need somebody that can say no to a guy. We got a story about Bob Iger, okay, of course, the big man at Disney, who did an interview with the Hollywood Reporter, and this was pretty scathing stuff. Now the interesting thing is, and this is what I mentioned at the top of the show here, that the Rob that you've brought up a few times, that really Bob Iger is the one steering the Star Wars ship.
Oh yeah.
And in the, and he was kind of being a shadow hand. Everybody thought Kathleen Kennedy was really calling all the shots, but maybe it was actually Bob Iger. I mean, I think I got you right in that's what you were saying.
Yeah, pretty much. I think a lot of the decisions that people have disliked in Disney's handling of Star Wars that have been pinned on Kathleen Kennedy, I think more than likely Iger was responsible for the majority of those decisions.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like, honestly, that theory has a lot of indication now. And Bob Iger might have actually admitted it himself, because he did an interview with the Hollywood Reporter where he came out and said, yeah, Star Wars isn't Marvel. And I was kind of trying to make it Marvel. And he's saying that there's going to be a slowdown, that there's a little bit of a backpedal on all of this. And not that I think some news sources are taking this a little too far, because I don't know that I read anywhere in the Hollywood Reporter piece directly. I don't know that I read anywhere that he said they weren't going to do a movie a year. I think they're still going to do a movie a year. I mean, a backpedal for Disney, figure what? There's 2-3 Marvel movies coming out a year from Disney,
Right.
so a backpedal, go ahead.
They've already greenlit and announced a lot of stuff.
Right.
So really the slowdown is only going to be in the stuff that they haven't announced yet. So you're still going to expect the new Ryan Johnson trilogy. And
right.
And you could still expect the new Star Wars live action television series.
Sure. Yeah, Benioff and Weiss trilogy is going to happen.
Yep,
yeah,
I'm willing to bet money that Filoni has another television show, animated show in the works, other than Resistance.
Right.
Even though that hasn't been announced yet, I'm fairly certain that's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, I was even thinking, it's interesting. Yeah, I know a lot of people are expecting that other animated series to be, and I wouldn't mind if it was, to be Ahsoka and our Mandalorian friend there, Sabine, Sabine Wren, to for it to be their story of finding Ezra and what's going on with Thrawn and so on. I was thinking about it. I'm like, if they do the time frame right, like you could still have Ashley Eckstein actually play Ahsoka if they go closer to like Force Awakens time frame, because like the ages would be right for her, Right. So I would be intrigued if they didn't do something more live action with that, and that it wouldn't be an animated series. But if that is a second animated, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think in a way doing a show focused on Sabine and Ahsoka is kind of like the easy choice.
Sure.
And I don't expect Filoni to do what we expect him to do.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I get you. Yeah, so anyway, Bob Iger came out. He said, he pretty much acknowledged, in fact, here's a direct quote, he made the timing decision, and as I look back, I think the mistake that I made, I take the blame, was a little too much too fast. I mean, do you agree with this, that he too much too fast?
Oh yeah, well, I've said it in the past. I think we've both said it in the past. I mean, like you said, a lot of this is just confirming that things we've talked on the show and months previous.
Yeah, is all true. Yeah, I mean, this is what's making me feel actually pretty hopeful about Star Wars right now.
Right.
Is that
we said things had to slow down. Right. They had to readjust their schedule, and and I hope it's not just production of content, but I mean the merchandising needs to slow down too.
Yeah,
because it's just there's just a dearth of like unsold Star Wars product out there, and I think it's actually hurting the brand.
Yeah, I mean, same thing that happened during episode 1, right? I mean, how much that shit stayed on the shelves and just lasted forever. I mean, at that point, you had 3 years between films, and maybe you could have a marketing machine last that long, but it was just too much. People are just like, oh my, holy fuck, I can't handle all this here.
Yeah,
yeah. It's the same thing. They didn't learn their lesson. They thought that lightning could strike twice, with what they had done with Marvel, but. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm hopeful about this because I just feel like, okay, good. They got the feedback that, okay, we got to take a breather. We got to slow this down. Part of what I think, I mean, again, I don't think that it's going to hurt anything as far as like a movie a year coming out. That's still going to happen. But even if this means there's not a novel a month or 2 novels a month, I mean, there was a while where we were getting like 2 novels a month.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the comic book series slowed down a bit, I mean, everything can go ahead and slow down a little bit because there's already so much to take in.
Right. But we did have a little bit of a dry period with the novels, which true. I think was fine.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I think the big thing is yeah, movie year's fine, but what we definitely don't need is 6 months between releases like we've got with the Last Jedi and Solo. If
Yeah,
they need to stop that. That needs to end.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's going to. And I mean, that's the thing is Star Wars is so inherently epic. I don't know if you can necessarily tell small, or at least for it to be what people expect. I don't think you can tell small stories like you can with Marvel. Like with Marvel, you can get away with releasing Ant-Man and doing okay money with it. You can
Hmm.
release Doctor Strange and doing okay money with it, and it doesn't have to be fucking Avengers Affinity War or whatever. Okay, you can get away with those little small stories. I think they're learning that Star Wars is kind of always the grand scale, and that's what people are looking for. If you want to do small stories, do it on TV.
Yeah,
And so like it felt like they were trying to do smaller stories in theaters, and people just weren't buying it. Like, I mean, it just
right,
wasn't delivering everything that people generally expect
right.
from a Star
Well,
Wars film.
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why Rogue One actually did work, because while it was a smaller story, it was very plugged into the greater epic,
Yes,
you know?
right. No, I agree. I think that makes it work very well.
Whereas, like I said, Solo, like we've said time and again, it was just kind of an unnecessary story and movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Solo real quick. We're actually going to review the novel here in a minute, or in a little bit, but I've noticed that people are actually really starting to dig this movie now that it's on its home release, because nobody
Hmm.
went to theaters to see it because they're
Yeah,
the theaters were just too hot. You had Deadpool 2, you had Avengers, you had all this stuff going on. People didn't have the time. And now that they're watching it, they end up really really liking it. I
right.
think I get the big reveal with Darth Maul, and I don't, there's no need for spoiler alerts anymore now because the movie's out and at home. Um, the reveal of Maul, man, if they played that up in the trailer or something, I think you would have gotten a lot more asses and seats. I think
You
people would have
probably,
been,
yeah,
yeah, I think that
yeah.
was a missed opportunity. If you're going to do that, like I get the appeal to doing the secret reveal, but shit, I think this movie could have done a lot more money if there was more Maul, and if they, like kind of put that out there. That would have been really interesting.
Yeah, especially if they plan on capitalizing that on that in the future and having him come back.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it also would have, well, I don't know. There's no way you couldn't notch. I mean, because even in the trailer, like revealing that in the trailer would have been just as huge. I think like it would have been just as like, holy fuck, what's he doing there? Yeah, I think it would have worked. But anyway, that's kind of getting off of the story. But Bob Iger's stepping back a little bit. I'm kind of hoping, I don't know if they're going to be open to other people, other opinions. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy, can do her thing, but I don't know if they're going to be open to, Kevin Feige or someone having a
Well,
little more say in the matter. Go ahead.
well, that's the thing too. Is like we don't even really know what Kathleen's real contributions have been at this point.
Good point.
Like if they actually let her steer the ship and things get better,
Right.
that could be a good thing. Because I don't think I don't believe for a minute of these rumors that she's being cut loose. That's
Right.
that's a bunch of
Yeah.
hogwash. And so I think it will be good for just the franchise if she's able to assert more control and steer the ship in a good direction. It'll put all of those rumors and bullshit to rest.
Yeah, yeah, I concur. I really hope so because I think she's a very smart woman, and
Yeah,
I think she was probably doing her best. And maybe her biggest win is Rogue One. Like I can almost believe after I heard this news and it was confirmed that Bob Iger really was steering the ship, and not her. I could imagine he's like, okay, you have to make this movie, you have to make this movie, you have to make this movie. So when someone walks into her office, when John Knoll walks into her office and says, "Hey, I'd like to make this movie," that being Rogue One, based upon this one line in the opening crawl of A New Hope, that she would just go, yeah, sure, okay, yeah, great, because she had so much pressure on her,
right.
to produce so many films. Like I could really believe that was going on in her head. Fortunately, it turned out, great. But yeah, oh man. Well, anyway, I guess, to some degree, kudos to Bob Iger for at least admitting that he was wrong. And I could definitely see that this is a very big saving face moment to be for in front of the fans, who I'm sure Disney was scared as shit that they were losing, and really I
Yeah.
think they were.
Well, I think part of this too is to allay fears of the investors.
Yeah. Oh yeah, which is ultimately who they have to please.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, anyway, any other comments on Bob Iger?
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, a lot of this is really just plays into stuff we said before. So I don't have much to say other than what I've said before.
Yeah, yeah. No, it just we ended up being right. I mean, that was the theory going, and we kind of saw the emperor's hands, behind everything, and I think it ended up being absolutely true. So, or well, it did end up being true. He admitted it himself. Well, anyway, then let's move on to our next bit here. And this is speaking of new things coming out for Star Wars. Boy, this is going to be coming in hot. I mean, just in another week or so. There's been a few trailers or mini documentaries. I don't know what exactly you'd want to call them. Packages, I think would be the technical term in Hollywood, for Star Wars Resistance, which is the animated show that's going to be on Disney XD and starts in October of 2018. And there was a specific kind of a character trailer that they put out called Aces, revealing the Aces, which are the main characters, at least of the first season of this show, that we're going to be introduced to. And there's a link in the show notes for anyone that wants to watch it before we talk about it. It's only a couple minutes, but boy, I'll tell you, this got me more excited for this show than any other package that Lucasfilm has put out there. To get you excited for the show. I mean, I thought that this was, to really like see all these different characters and kind of get a little bit of backstory on each one. I thought was brilliant. And I'm like, oh, I like this. I like this rogues gallery that we've got here,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, there's a few characters, like there's a character, one of the female characters, kind of has like a Russian affect to her. And I was like, oh, well, that's great. Let's have the tough as nails lady racer there. There's the ex TIE fighter pilot, which I imagine you want to bring up. I know that was really cool. All the characters seemed really, like they seemed fun, even though I recognize that this show is definitely geared at probably the youngest age group that anything Star Wars on the screen has ever been geared at. Like I can appreciate that, but of course, like you and I have said in past Star Wars updates, that'll grow over time. Like it'll get darker, it'll get grittier over time, as most of these animated Star Wars shows do. So I mean, what were your thoughts on the Aces trailer there?
Yeah, I loved it. I think they got a really just fantastically diverse cast.
Yeah.
Different, personalities and character types. And I love that they have a Rodian is kind of like has a speaking role. That was just really cool.
Yeah, and he speaks English, or basic,
right,
as they would say in Star Wars.
Yeah, which kind of haven't really, and that they're having like so many aliens and not just humans as main sort of characters.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really like the feel of it. I like and again, like you said, I like the diversity of characters. I think it looks like a lot of fun, and I kind of get it. And that ex TIE fighter pilot, that's going to be. Really, really interesting to see how that interaction goes. And
I love how he painted up his helmet to look like a skull too. It was really cool.
Yeah, total motorcycle badass guy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it just worked, and I love what they have in mind. I mean, granted, we're learning more and more as more of the. In fact, there's another trailer that dropped today. We're recording this on September 27th, 2018. There was another trailer that dropped today that I actually thought was pretty intense. But it's interesting. You're not in almost any of these packages and trailers that have been released. You're not seeing much of Filoni. And
I was going to mention that. Yeah, actually, okay. and I actually like that because, as I said before, I think with Filoni kind of taken a back seat on this series, he's given other creative talents the opportunity to show off.
Yeah, sure.
And get their time in the spotlight. I think that's great because, I mean, that's really what we've been talking about, like even in the last pieces, we just need more talent.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, as much as this show has a very diverse cast of characters, I think that Lucasfilm could use a diverse, cast of producers and content creators.
Right.
And it really needs a lot of them. So yeah, I agree. If Filoni wants to start, kind of raising the the next generation, shall we say, of Lucasfilm artists and directors and so on. I mean, hey, great, like let's
Yeah.
make that happen.
And that just kind of like reinforces for me that the feeling I've had since the beginning is that Filoni is really kind of like the person carrying the torch of George's spirit in the company now.
Yeah.
You got other people running the business, and that's understandable because it's probably not Filoni's interest. But so far as like I said, the spirit of what George had in mind for this series, he's the one who's carrying that on and giving other people the same opportunities that he had back when he started working on the Clone Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really, I mean, well, on the production side, that instills a lot of confidence, and I mean, it just allows for better content overall when you give people the chance to flourish like that, and are kind of hands off. So I agree with you. I appreciate that Filoni is not necessarily like so much into this one, or maybe he will be more later in later seasons. He's kind of letting the kid stuff get out there, and then when it gets grittier, maybe he'll be in on it more. I don't know, but either way, I really like what I'm seeing so far. I'm definitely going to be watching this. I know there's a lot of Star Wars fans, unfortunately, that have kind of said, "Oh, I'm not going to bother with this one. This one's for kids."
Yeah, but we've heard
good.
that so many times. They said that during the Clone Wars. They said that when Rebels started. I mean, I'm just this is a very old argument that really, a couple of years in, nobody's saying this anymore,
right?
Other than just the most diehard dullards.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, I'm excited for it. Watching that Aces trailer, that's the thing that actually kind of hooked me, where I'm like, okay, no, I'm going to be able to enjoy this. This isn't going to be something that I'm just going to watch kind of begrudgingly because I have to know everything about Star Wars. So, because I mean, there was a little bit of a time where I was a little worried about that, even though I do also kind of dig the Robotech feel of the show so far.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it definitely has that Robotech feel. It also reminded me a lot of a series. I think it was back in either late 90s, early 2000. But do you remember, what was it called? Zoids?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean,
the toy line, the whole thing.
Yeah. This reminds me very much of that. And if
because that was quasi CGI.
Right.
I remember that. Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah, I could see that. Yeah. I think this is going to do all right. I think this is going to be really, anyway, and it's certainly in like 3 years. I can't wait to see what this is going to look like.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's going to be cool. So anyway, Resistance, everybody keep their eyes peeled. I want to say it's like October 7th or something. I can't recall exactly what night it is.
Yeah, it's either 7th or the 10th. It's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we'll definitely be talking about it on the next show.
Definitely. Yeah, we'll definitely get our reviews in for that. Once for the October Star Wars update. So, all right, something that was revealed yesterday. I think it was yesterday, or was it today? Anyway, it was at the Oculus event. Which of course is a reference to the Oculus, VR technology that Facebook bought out from John Carmack. They announced it's called Vader Immortal. And at first I didn't know exactly what it was. Like, there's a trailer for it. There's a link in the show notes. You can check it out. At first they said it was a series, and I'm like, well, is it a game or is it just something you're going to sit there and watch? Because those are popular things on VR headsets today. Like, you have the Jurassic World Blue, where, you just pop on the headset and you just you get to look around and see everything that the dinosaurs are doing, all of which is very, I think it's beautiful. I have an Oculus Go, and I enjoy a lot of that kind of content. But turns out it is going to be a game. And it's specifically for a new headset that's going to run for $400 that Facebook announced, I guess yesterday. I think yesterday was the event. That it's called the Oculus Quest, which is going to be it's kind of a middle of the road VR headset between the Oculus Go, which is a standalone headset and only costs $200, which makes it a very attractive thing. That's why I ended up getting one. And it attaches it like, it's kind of controlled by an app on your phone, but you don't have to plug your phone into it. It doesn't require the phone's battery or anything like that to operate.
Okay.
Yeah. But go ahead.
I was really wondering about, because I haven't read much up on the Oculus Quest yet. The first thing I heard about it sounded like is very much just kind of like a high-end Gear VR, where you actually have to use the phone as your display unit. But if it's more than that, then yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's a standalone headset. It's not as powerful, I think, as the Oculus Rift, which
Hmm.
nothing that's standalone can be as powerful as what you're literally plugging in to your PC.
Right. Well, I mean,
Or
to
at
me,
least
like
not
to me, the big factor in these VR headsets is always what's the resolution, because that does matter when it comes to VR. It
yet.
may not matter as much these days in gaming with PC monitors and stuff, but it's definitely a big deal when it comes to VR.
Right. No, you're right. And pixel count and resolution is a very weird thing with
Yeah,
VR headsets because
yeah,
as far as
that
I
and
understand, go ahead.
that's accurate in that PPI, pixels per inch, is far more important than just overall resolution.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the PPI, I forget what they said the numbers were on this, but anyway, it's middle of the road. It's between the Oculus Go and the Rift. And personally,
Okay.
like I've enjoyed just about every experience I've done on the Go, even if they're a little more basic. But like resolution wise, as far as I understand it, and I don't think the Quest is breaking this rule, but really like any kind of video content, it really can't do more than 720p.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
anything else is just burning pixels pretty much when you get
Right.
higher than that, which is, eventually we'll get there. But regardless, so this will be a game. It's going to be a series. It's being done by David S. Goyer, which I think that's exciting as hell. I mean,
Yeah. Well, there's actually talk about this many months ago when it was still like in early development,
uh-huh.
and Goyer did an interview where he was talking about it.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. This isn't actually the first time. Like, this is the official announcement. It's not the first time it's been talked about that. Um, and I don't know if they actually achieve what they were going for, what he talked about for. But what he talked about before was is that it was very interactive, and so much that there was a certain level of AI in that you could have a conversation with Vader, and he would respond to specific things that you said. And if they can pull that off, this is going to be, in my opinion, like a killer app for VR.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it's on the right hardware because the Quest is independent. It doesn't require like to be connected to your PC and everything. The price
Mm-hmm.
point's pretty good. 400 for a complete package that doesn't require a gaming PC or something is pretty good. Um,
Is this
and
an exclusive?
I think so. Or I mean,
Oh,
for now, well,
okay.
because the Quest is kind of unique in that it's a standalone and it has the 6 points of movement instead of just three like the Oculus Go. So this is a
Right.
very unique package that
Yeah, but
that is getting out
the
there.
Vive can do that too.
Yeah. Oh, right. There is a Vive that's standalone now, isn't there?
Yeah. Hmm.
Vive Blue or something. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Right.
I mean that, like, so far as all the Vives have six. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
Yeah. The 6 degrees or 6 points.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In fact, that was the big selling point on the very first iteration.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, I like it seems from what I gathered from the trailer is you get kidnapped by Vader and he's
Hmm.
train you to be a Sith. I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing. Like, the trailer doesn't exactly say a whole lot, but I do trust David S. Goyer. I mean, we're talking about
Yeah.
the guy who wrote the Blade trilogy. I
Right.
mean, which I'm a huge fan of. There's a laundry list of movies that this guy has written that are just tremendous, and so I'm really, really excited for this one.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah,
Like,
it's coming
yeah.
out spring 2019. I will definitely be getting an Oculus Quest just to do this.
And I really hope that they were able to pull off the stuff they were talking about early on, because they talked about, it was one of the reasons they brought Goyer on is because he does have done these kind of like almost horror high tension sort of,
Sure,
projects. And
sure.
so, like, that's what they wanted to bring him in for. And this is like, this is bringing back what everybody really loves about Vader. Is more of like the kind of Vader that we saw in Rogue One. This is very just, this intimidating, frightening character.
Yeah,
I think one of the biggest criticisms of the prequels, it took some of the edge off of that character,
yeah,
and
yeah. I
we want to bring that back.
No, I agree, and I actually feels like Disney is kind of making a concerted effort to do so. Like in the Darth Vader comic, you're getting that Vader.
Right,
You're very much getting Frankenstein's monster.
right.
And also, actually, in Dr. Aphra 24, which just came out yesterday as of this recording, like well, spoiler alerts. When you get towards the end, you find out that Tolvin like kind of called in Darth Vader to solve a situation, and like the horror that all the characters kind of experience. Like you don't even say his name, you just know by the level of horror that they're feeling on the comic book panel. I was like, oh man, this is Vader, you know. And they just like
Right.
show one shot of him. It's all you needed because you knew he was just going to start tearing shit up.
Right.
Yeah, that I agree with you. That's a great point. Is that we need
Yeah.
Vader back, and we're getting it.
And in fact, one still to this very day, one of my favorite Star Wars comic book moments is in the Darth Vader comic when, in fact, it was actually a crossover. They did this in two comics, but when Boba Fett essentially reveals to Vader that he has a son, and
Right.
you know, he found out that the Emperor essentially lied to him, and he's standing there on the, you know, and
that's when like the window cracks.
Yes.
Yeah, the glass cracks, and he's looking out at the starscape,
Yes.
and all it does, like the comic book panel just shows the glass cracking a little bit, and
Right.
it's so much. I'm totally with you. That was awesome.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then right after that, he gets on a call with the Emperor, and he's basically, yeah, we understand each other now.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty badass. Man, the comics are doing wonders. So anyway, Vader Immortal, very excited for this. I will definitely be doing a review of it, or we'll be doing a review of it on the Star Wars update. Again, that won't be until spring of 2019. Well, I guess, you know, something that's not exactly always living up to expectations, as good as the comic books are doing, sort of overall. The main title is still kind of weird. Is the novelization, or the novels and the novelizations. They've been kind of touch and go. And I want to just do a quick review because there's actually not a whole lot to say. But I did read Solo: A Star Wars Story Expanded Edition, the novel by Mur Lafferty. And her writing is, you didn't get the chance to read this, Rob, correct?
No. And I appreciate you taking one for the team on this one.
Well, fortunately, at 2.35x, it only took me about 4 hours. It got too much of my time, but I'll admit I couldn't wait for it to be over. I mean, there's stuff in there, and like, yeah, you find out that Kira had a previous encounter sort of with Maul. There's Jyn Erso's at the end of it, you know, a very young Jyn Erso, and Saw Gerrera's there. I mean, you get little pieces like this, but I don't know. You know, it didn't do anything. Yeah, I mean it really did, and we cracked a joke about it, about being the pointless novel over the pointless movie, and it really felt like that, and it sucks, you know, like, because actually, as we reviewed on the show previously, like, I thought the expanded edition novelization of The Last Jedi was fantastic. Like, it was way better than the movie, in my opinion, my personal opinion, because it answered a lot of the things and it got in the heads of the characters almost in a Dune way, that really I don't think Rian Johnson was able to parlay on the screen. And that's why they had that 10-minute extra bonus feature in the Rogue One home release, where he explains what the fuck's going on with Rey and what the fuck's going on with everything else.
Right.
The novel did a great job of explaining that ahead, you know, right within the story. And so I love that. So I was kind of disappointed about the expanded edition. I was just like, yeah. So there's nothing really to say about it. It's really only something to read if you're like, you know, if you're just that hardcore, or if you do a podcast about Star Wars. Otherwise, that's what I've got on that.
I really hope that they don't do these expanded editions for every novelization. I feel like they could have just, you know, like that should be something special.
Yeah.
It feels like, you know, the expanded edition is like, okay, let's, you know, mop up all of our mistakes and clarify some things. And, you know, like, here again, it was unnecessary for this one.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're going to go to the level of that they did with The Last Jedi, and that was what was disappointing for me. Is there's only a couple things I can think of that were like really added anything of any kind of note. Again, The Last Jedi novelization, there's tons of things that it adds in. It adds in where Snoke came from. It gave you at least a little something about Snoke. The ending to The Last Jedi novelization is eons better than the ending of the movie, because there's a beautiful conversation between Rey and Leia. And I mean, you really get like, it's almost a tear jerking moment that this conversation happens. And what a shame that that never got put into the film and we end up
Yeah.
with Broom Kid. It's like, what the fuck? So, but yeah, unless you're going to do that, I agree with you. Don't bother, doing too much, or, don't bother with doing like making it a big deal that they're expanded editions or something, because they're not.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, something that kind of expanded actually upon Solo: A Star Wars Story is a 5-issue comic book series which just wrapped up this month. That being Lando: Double or Nothing. Again, it was 5 issues, and it did just wrap up. You got the chance to read this, Robin, correct?
Yeah, I was waiting until they all came out, and then I binged them just recently here.
Yeah, great way to read it, because
Yeah.
one at a time, I don't know, like, I mean, the story is kind of grabbing. It's about a
Mhm.
revolution effectively of the protrusions, I think their names were.
Yeah.
And it does lead right up to Solo: A Star Wars Story. Like, you
Right.
find out, and maybe this is the most important thing to come out of it. You do find out why the Falcon is impounded on Vandor.
Right.
Um, and it's because the Empire took it, so spoiler alerts, folks.
Right.
But
Well, I mean, you already knew that the Empire took it, but now you know why.
yeah, right, exactly. And now you know why it's impounded and they have to free it in the movie. I mean, what did you think about the series overall, Rob?
I enjoyed it overall. It certainly wasn't the best comic they've done yet, but
Right.
I enjoyed the art. Certainly, they've been doing a lot better on the art on sort of the non-mainline series.
Yes.
So I appreciate that. People being able to show off, talent and characters that look like them but aren't carbon copy traceovers of art from the movies, stills from the movies.
Yeah, because honestly, if they did that with this, some of its best moments you wouldn't have been able to put on in the panel.
Right.
There's a point where Lando's really helping out these protrusions, in a battle sequence, and he's like doing flips and his cape's flying and everything, and obviously, neither Donald Glover or Billy D ever did any of those moves.
Right.
And it was pretty awesome. Like, I mean, it was cool to see him kind of in action, and I liked, because this comic book kind of plays off the idea of the Calrissian Chronicles, which we get a little touch of in Solo: A Star Wars Story.
Right.
And I liked his inner monologue. There were some points where reading this, I was actually laughing out loud, especially with L3. I think L3 is hilarious. I mean, a little over the top, but hilarious.
Yes.
But what else you got on it?
Like I said, I enjoyed it there. I only have just a couple of small complaints.
Sure.
And one of them isn't even really a complaint, but I mean, like, I think they kind of, they definitely played up a lot of Calrissian's sort of bombacity,
Yeah.
In this. And it was a little bit annoying at times, but I understand that, this is when he's really young.
Yeah.
And he's extremely arrogant, but I mean, that fits with the character. So
Right.
it's fine. And the other thing is like I really like the character L3. I wish she had gotten more on this that expanded on her character, other than us kind of seeing her do a lot of the same things that she did in the Solo movie.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's fair. Yeah. Yeah, and more than what we got in Most Wanted, because she was
Right.
in that book as well. Yeah, I mean, I liked it. Admittedly, in my own head, I set a pretty high bar, even though I know this was going to be attached to Solo: A Star Wars Story. But the first Lando miniseries comic book that Marvel did is still the best I think comic series that they produced.
This doesn't even come close.
No, not even remote.
And I'm not trying to say this is a bad series. Like I said, I enjoyed it overall, but this doesn't come anywhere close. It's a pale shadow of that first Lando comic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of like, I need to reread it at some point.
Yeah,
and just
yeah.
analyze, like, wait a minute, what the hell made this so great? I mean, I know part of it is because the Emperor in some way is involved.
Well, I think also too, like the character in the first Lando comic was more mature and had a depth to him that I just don't think would work in this time for Lando, just because of who he was at that time. And like I said, he was very young, very naive and arrogant.
Yeah, it's true. We've got about at least 10 years in between, I would say, those comics.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Yeah. So, Yeah, I think that that's a big part of it too. But hot damn, I mean that first Lando comic series was phenomenal, and this pale shadow. But yeah, I enjoyed it too. I mean that's really all I can say about it, is that I enjoyed it, and I get it. It's a vehicle really to lead up to Solo, a Star Wars story, and the comic book series or adaptation of Solo, a Star Wars story will start up directly after this. Usually those add in some kind of scenes and different aspects of the film. So I'll be interested to see what that has going for it. But I don't know. I'm not feeling like super hopeful
Yeah,
about that. And we're not going to review the Last Jedi comic book adaptation wrapped up this month. We'll save that for next month. But I'll just say that like that didn't add in as much as I was kind of hoping for, like they did with Rogue One, where that has been a trend of having deleted scenes in these things. So I didn't exactly get that feel from it.
yeah.
But regardless, Lando, Double or Nothing, totally serviceable comic book, and lead up to the movie. So anything else on that, Robin?
No, I have pretty much the same. I mean, it was good overall, not a must read, but if you got a few spare bucks, and when the trade paperback comes out, it's worth picking up.
Yeah, I concur. I agree with that. All right, well, let's go. While we're talking about comics, let's get to the next comic book really on the list. And this is actually a wrap up of a 31 issue series. Of course, there's a couple annuals in there, I believe. That being the Poe Dameron comic, which I don't think anybody expected to even come out, partly because it was dealing so closely with The Force Awakens. And it seemed like, and this is before The Last Jedi came out, Disney was being very hush hush on, hey, what the hell is the story here? What is the story that we're going to do going forward, and so on. And so they didn't want to go too deep into that. Of course, Disney didn't even know really what the story was going into anything after,
Right.
which is part of the problem. But this takes place. This series initially took place very, very close to the beginning of The Force Awakens, and then it is now really the only thing we have that ended up going past The Last Jedi, particularly in the last 5 or 6 issues, I think. And that's
Right.
made it particularly special. Initially, it was enjoyable just to get, it really felt like the first, I don't know, 20, 25 issues of it. Again, it was a 31 issue run, and it is over now. Initially, for me, it did feel a lot like Michael A. Stackpole's, not so much Rogue Squadron, but Wraith Squadron.
Hmm.
Those novels, and they did do some Rogue Squadron comics as well, and it had that feel. They did a pretty good job of capturing that. Maybe not as dark and gritty as Dark Horse would take it, but they did all right, and I enjoyed it overall. There's the, oh shit, now the character's name is escaping me. I just had it. He flies around in the Carrion Spike, that was originally Tarkin's ship.
Oh yeah, right. Oh shoot, I just lost it too.
Yeah, I had it there, and then it just left me. But anyway, he was a guy. He's an ex-Imperial who ended up working for the First Order. He becomes an agent for them or whatever. And there were some interesting stories within all of that. But I think maybe the most important, I want to hear, your thoughts on the series overall, but probably the things that people will remember this series for have been like the last 5 issues, where it is going past Last Jedi, and you're finding out what happened to a lot of characters, like Snap Wexley and his gal and others. Like where were they during the evacuation of Dakar, at the beginning of Jedi and so on. You find out what happens with that. You actually get some words from Rey. In issue 31, the last issue, there's actually a great conversation between Poe and Leia that I really enjoyed. And well, I mean, and with the series ending off, I felt I enjoyed it. I like, especially issue 31. I really liked a lot of what had, there's some great quotes in it. Actually, I like Poe Dameron saying it's not about saving the galaxy, it's about saving your galaxy, meaning your loved ones, your people around you that you care about. You don't have to save the whole galaxy, which is a really great message that kind of stands in contrast for me from like this whole unite everybody bullshit that Disney likes to push, from, and everything from their Marvel movies to High School Musical. So, I liked this series overall. It could have gone in some places that I would have enjoyed more, but I dug it overall. I mean, what do you think, Rob? You can, a whole series overview, and if you want to talk about issue 31, go for it.
Yeah. I initially I was not expecting much from this series, and I think a lot of people underestimated it. And that's really kind of a shame because I think of all the Star Wars comics, it has been the most consistent in terms of quality.
That's true. Yeah, I agree.
And so I would say people that who are interested in, of course, what happens after the Last Jedi, don't just read the last five. Go back and start from the beginning
Mm-hmm.
because it's a really good run, and I think it's kind of unfortunate that it's ending now because, like I said, it has been so consistent in its quality, and I think a lot of people did underestimate it, and for me, it could keep going, but I understand that they've probably come to like the end and what they're willing to push forward in the future of the Star Wars universe, you know,
Yeah.
because if they kept going, obviously they're going to run into Episode 9, and they don't want to do that. So it's kind of unfortunate they got ahead of themselves in that way and had to end the series. But yeah, overall, I say this is probably the most consistent comic book in Marvel's Star Wars stable right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a great assessment to say is that it's just rock steady. And in fact, that also lends itself kind of to the X-Wing novels and comics of the 90s in the
Right.
US, because that was a series that was, while, everything else in Star Wars was kind of up and down because sometimes they'd actually let Kevin J. Anderson write something and fuck that. Uh, Michael Stackpole and whoever else is writing the X-Wing novels, we were at least guaranteed a good time,
Right.
every couple months. And so I think that's a great analogy that you made. Or I mean, I think that analogy shows your point that you made, that this has really been a rock solid run. Maybe not like the greatest thing that they've done, say,
No.
but a very, very good run.
Yeah, like I said, there's been moments like we brought up early with the Vader comic. There's that they've had higher highs
Yeah.
in other comic books, but so far it's just really because we've talked about, I think before, the initial Vader comic had some real low points, and
Yes.
then it picked up again and got really good. But I mean, if you want a comic book series, like I said, that's a good ride all the way through. There's not an issue that I can point out and say that one was a real stinker or it was just filler. No, this is a good series.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I really liked I mean, like they did the little, I mean, all of the Star Wars comics have little mini series within them, part 1, part 2, part 3,
Right.
part 5. I enjoyed when they went to Nemodia and they were
Yes.
dealing with rescuing Lor Santeca.
Yes,
Uh,
I was just about to say that was probably actually my favorite storyline was the Lor Santeca storyline.
yeah, same here. I mean, but even when it opened up with that cosmic egg thing, that was cool. I mean, there were a lot of great stories in this, or at least very, very enjoyable stories, I should.
Mm-hmm.
I did. So one of the major deals, and that's getting some news because I think it does relate to episode 9, is that in issue 31, granted, there's only like maybe 10, 12 people in the resistance overall. Leia gives Poe a promotion, gives him the promotion or the return to rank of commander, and just says, don't fuck it up this time. More or less. And it was a really cool moment. So because in The Last Jedi, of course, Poe does get demoted to captain.
Right.
Which it's interesting that, I mean, there's very few places where commander is a higher rank than captain. And certainly within science fiction. I mean, the only other one I can think of in science fiction would be Battlestar Galactica, though I'm sure there's others. But yeah, but I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. That's cool. So that's a bit of a highlight to end the series off. And like I said, I did like the message that the series ended off with as well, that it's about, saving your galaxy and not necessarily the galaxy, which that worked for me. Right. So any other thoughts on the Poe Dameron series?
No, like I said, it was a like good consistent run. I encourage everybody to go check this out one because it surprised me.
Yeah, same here. And again, it's 31 issues. I mean, you can get through that in pretty short order. So all right, well, let's move on to our next bit of news, and then we've got you've actually got an awesome thing that I can't wait for. So for those that are listening to the audio, you're going to want some video, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes. Because we're going to get a little show and tell here. And, Star Wars, we all knew as kids, Star Wars is all about show and tell. So anyway, but before we get into that, a game, Star Wars Rivals. Now, this was a mobile game. I believe it was available on Android and iOS, and it was sort of in beta for a while. You could kind of sneak into the beta. But just this month, they actually Disney announced, we're not going to release it at all. Like, we're just not going to bother with it. And I looked into this game a bit. the sad part is, and you and I, Rob, have talked about this quite a bit, and we're certainly going to highlight this point when we get to our question of the month. Um, like there are no great games coming out ever since Disney took the helm of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say since Disney gave the reins to EA.
Yeah, right,
I mean,
right.
that's really the point here.
Yeah, and the Star Wars Rivals, I mean, everybody knew it was a money sucker. It was
Yeah.
IAP and everything else that makes
Yeah,
mobile games
this
horrible.
is a mobile game, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
mobile
And
game.
there's already a huge dearth of those. I mean, that's the they've put out more mobile games in, the last few years since Disney acquired the Star Wars license than there's almost been total Star Wars games in history.
Right.
It's just ridiculous the number of Star Wars mobile games there are. It makes me
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah, and only one of them ever even like had any bearing, and even that took place in this whole other part of the galaxy.
Yeah, and they dumped
Bearing-
that. They canceled it before even finishing the story. I mean, it's just shit.
I know, no, I hear you, man. It's so bad. And so, like, I read the news, I was like, well, you know what, fucking good, because
Yeah,
this is just tarnishing Star Wars right and left. But I think that, I mean, so this may have come out of the whole Bob Iger thing. I don't know, that they just need to backpedal on the Star Wars shit for a little bit. But I think this speaks to a much bigger problem in the gaming industry. The incentives for the reasons to make a game today are just so perverted from what they used to be, that I mean, you can't expect any other kind of game, at least now. And I mean, and even it's not just mobile games, it's fucking Battlefront 2. It's
right. Well, it's EA's whole business model. And if you've been, reading the gaming news lately, they're doubling, tripling down on this loot box shit. They just will not let it go.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to some degree empathize with like the game company, with the producers. Now, I don't really want to empathize with EA because fuck them. But it's tough because like now, you have to, games come with these multi-million-dollar budgets, to make them now. And it was not always that way. And they've got to make, a huge return on that. And so, of course, they bake all this shit into it. But that's, you're losing the reason that people love making, the passion for making games and so on. I mean, it just seems like it's gone. I have no hope unless they're doing like remasters or something, or just re-releases. I mean, look how well Star Wars Racer resold. I mean, that did crazy money, and the game's 20 years old or however old.
Right. And of course, that stuff has nothing to do with EA. And that's you know. And here again, I mean, I know people have harped on this quite a bit, but really, they either need to take the license away from EA or open it up to other developers to do it. Because I mean, you think about it, really, LucasArts back in the day, they were part of a big corporation, but they operated like an indie studio.
Yeah.
And that's really what you need back in Star Wars, is to get some of these indie studios these days that are making great games, not necessarily with AAA graphics, but with good content.
Yeah.
And put that out there. That's what Star Wars needs right now.
Yeah. And you got it. And I don't know. I'm hoping this attitude that Bob Iger is talking about kind of sticks, because like Telltale Games is shutting down. Now, I thought they were a great indie studio. I love what they did with Jurassic Park and Back to the Future and all of those games. But they got grubby too, and they went too. They stretched themselves too far, and they tried to be all AAA and say, all right, we'll put in $1 million budgets and we'll make $1 million and blah blah blah. Where if they just stayed like in their Back to the Future stage when they're doing that, they probably still be around and fine.
Well, the other from other people I've talked to that have played more of their games than I have is that they really never got out of sort of using the same narrative model.
Right.
That they used back when they made it big on, basically everything was an iteration on the first Walking Dead season.
Sure. Right.
And it was, a lot of people say it was after that, it was the same game over and over and over and over again. And I think maybe that was probably had a lot more to do with why, they collapsed. So they tried to do too many of those and too much iteration of the same, template. And it's got stale.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it just goes that, like, the mini retro consoles are all the rage right now. Everybody's going nuts about them. And I think the reason is because people are playing that and like, holy shit, this game just wants me to have fun. It doesn't want to take my fucking money.
Yeah.
And that's an attitude that is really, really missing, because you can't make money off of a game if it isn't fun in the damn first place.
Right.
Not
and then, like I said, that's the attitude you find in indie studios. That's
exactly
primarily the only place you find that these days.
Exactly.
And that's why I say, like, back in the day, LucasArts, they were a big company, but they acted like an indie studio.
No, absolutely.
You think about some of the stuff like all these like Double Fine and stuff like that, they exist today because of LucasArts.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And they're doing some of the remasters and they're treating it with respect.
Right.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I agree with that. So anyway, I just think this speaks to it speaks to a problem in Star Wars, and it speaks to a problem in the gaming industry as a whole, that this game got shut down. Because even just 10 years ago, I don't think anybody would say that a Star Wars game was going to fail. Like that just, no one would say that. And I don't know. So anyway, just an interesting point to bring up. And I think there's a much larger conversation to be had around this. And I hope I want to get excited about Star Wars games again, because Star Wars games fucking saved Star Wars back in the 90s.
Yep.
As much as Timothy Zahn did. And I'm sure we'll talk about that.
That's
again.
A great segue actually to our next topic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's talk more about it now, because it's not just video games. Let's talk about, like the good old tabletop, RPG.
Right.
And so when this came out, it was announced, I don't know, a few months ago, maybe a year ago, that they were going to
it was announced a long time ago. We had to wait a long time for this to come out.
Yeah.
Because the 30th anniversary was actually back in last year. And so they missed, the actual anniversary on the publication of this thing. So but it was worth the wait.
Yeah, so this is the re-release of the West End Games original.
Yes, the very first Star Wars RPG that was made back in 1988.
Man.
Yeah.
Now, talk about something that saved Star Wars. Like this, actually, that made Star Wars. Like the idea that every little character and all this stuff mattered was because West End put a name to the face. And, they really made Star Wars the world that you could inhabit in Lucas made it dirty. West End Games gave it all a name, and you can't conceptualize it till you have a name. And once they did that, I think, cannot understate the importance of what West End Games did for Star Wars.
They in many ways kind of expanded the sandbox beyond the toy lines back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And so, and it came along at just the right time, because you had back there in the late 80s, early 90s, what they kind of referred to as the dark era of Star Wars, where there really just wasn't anything coming out at all.
Yeah.
Star Wars content related wise.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of respect and thanks to Fantasy Flight Games, who is the current license holder for Star Wars role-playing games. They, by no means, they did not have to do this. And it kind of shows just their love of Star Wars. And while I've disagreed with some of the things the company's done, this shows that the people behind it over there really do love Star Wars. Because anybody who remembered this game back in the day, it stuck with you. And like we were talking about earlier with Timothy Zahn, a lot of the depth that he put into the books came from these source books.
Directly, yeah.
Yes,
the guide to the Star Wars universe.
It really was this basically the role-playing game was basically the style guide for the entire universe for future authors. Yeah, and so they came out with a 2-book set, which was the original role-playing game and the source book, and this really just beautiful slipcase.
That's stunning. Yeah. So we want to get a video on this, because this is just a gorgeous collection here.
Yeah. And so they released this and the main book here, and also the Star Wars source book, which is really kind of this is like the rules, but this is like, and so far as the style guide for what future authors use, so far as referring to different information and names of planets and starships and just stats and their capabilities. That all came from this book.
Yeah. I mean, was that, did they come out at the same time, or was the source book kind of an expansion pack that they did?
Yeah, this I mean they came out fairly close to each other, but yeah, it was pretty much an expansion on the original. Like I said, the rule book was really just meant to lay down the D6 rules
Right.
for the systems for the game,
Right.
and gave you information on how to build a character and all that kind of stuff, and get you going. But so far as like all the information you needed for the storyteller to populate the universe was in this book.
Yeah, now they would release a bunch of those source books over the years. Like they'd
Oh
have
yeah.
the Empire, they'd have one even for Dark Empire, pretty much all the
Yep.
way until Wizards of the Coast ended up buying it out, I think, and they did the D20 system. They rebooted the whole RPG, but I don't think they ever recaptured the magic of what.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a sad story with West End Games. Is they actually it wasn't so much that Wizards of the Coast bought the license, but West End Games as a company folded
Yeah,
back in the 90s, and they went out of business. And so, naturally it ended up going on to another company. But yeah, I still have a ton of those source books back in the day, and they're treasures in my Star Wars collection. And this is
yeah,
too.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're opening up the book there. I mean, that is so. I mean, back in the '80s, I mean, that was full color, just like they've got in there and everything. I mean, like it's an amazing. We're talking pre-internet. What a deluge of information that you have within those books.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
and a lot of that they made up.
right down to like full on blueprints of different
Oh,
ships and stuff. This is like some of the first time that anybody saw stuff like this. Star Wars
yeah.
blueprints and stuff are pretty popular and common today, but really it was kind of West End Games that made those things popular and sought after.
Yeah, that would definitely inspire like the essential guides that came out throughout the 90s
Mm-hmm.
for Star Wars, which were to this day are my favorite books to ever come out for Star Wars.
Yeah.
I thought they were
And
they were just wonderful. Yeah.
and West End Games, they didn't just do game systems, but like they even had one of the real gems they had was called the Star Wars Adventure Journal, and they
Yes.
had these quarterly journals that came out that then they're really sought after these days. And they even had short stories by Timothy Zahn and
Yeah.
many of the prominent Star Wars authors from back in the 90s.
Yeah, and I think I think on the torrents you can get some scans of these.
Yes. Yes.
And I think they're well worth it in my opinion. So at least you can
Yeah.
see
In
them in
fact,
that way.
there's if you're looking for some of this stuff, there's a website called D6 Holocron.
Ah,
Go
ooh.
check that out.
Okay, if I remember, I'll put that in the show notes. But that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, so give me the review. I mean, do you think it sounds like you said they paid reverence, they paid
Yeah.
respect to it,
Yeah.
and they did it right. I mean, this is a
Yeah,
good
they
release.
did. And actually, I didn't find out until afterwards. And they had a dedication in the front. The guy who really kind of spearheaded this project, Steve Wake, who sadly passed away last year.
Mhm.
And he's been around in the RPG industry for quite a many years. People probably recognize him as being one of the founders of White Wolf Studios, who made
Oh
like
yeah,
the Vampire Masquerade games.
yeah,
So
one of my
he was
favorites.
the one kind of that put this project together and really made it happen. And I think that was probably one of the reasons why it was delayed so much, was because he passed away.
Yeah, yeah. It actually strikes me you showing me all this and we're talking about it. Just on a couple days ago, the new complete visual dictionary of Star Wars by Pablo Hidalgo came out. And I got it. Of course, I buy all the Star Wars books. Or new canon. I buy all the encyclopedias and guides and everything that come out. And something that struck me, and that West End Games was again one of the really powerful things that they did. Something that struck me was I was like, like this is fine and all, and Pablo does his work and whatever, but literally this is only stuff within, say, the movies. Like there's nothing from the comic books. There's no real expansion. There's not, I mean, you find out some little new things here and there that can be kind of interesting, but I was realizing, I'm like, damn, I miss like the essential guide to characters or the essential guide to vehicles and vessels.
Yeah.
Because in those, like they would really expand and they'd put the entire universe together. And I think West End Games would do the same thing. And I don't feel like I'm getting that same thing from a lot of these visual dictionaries and so on that Disney's been putting out.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new book yet because I
Mhm.
haven't got it.
It's big.
But
I mean, it's a
but
big
but
book.
yeah, even looking at the solo visual guide and what like to a certain degree, I kind of feel like he's dialing a little bit. The interesting note about Pablo Hidalgo, West End Games is where he got his first job.
Oh,
Where
no,
he
well, that's interesting.
started.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
He
okay.
worked on several of the not in the early years, but later on, he did a little bit of art and some writing.
Yeah,
So as a like sort of Star Wars professional, that was his first job in the industry.
that's interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, and the other thing too is like it's most of these guides now are clearly geared towards children,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's annoying to me because kids can handle, and I know because I was one. I can handle like reading a West End Games guide which says, "No, this is Star Wars. This is fucking serious, and we're not gonna like tone it down or water it down or anything. We're gonna talk about, yeah,
right.
Tarkin landed that fucking Star Destroyer on somebody."
And
And
I
go ahead.
feel like this is missing from the current Star Wars role playing game, which is
Hmm.
by Fantasy Flight Games. I'm not really knocking them so much because I'm sure they're getting direction from Lucasfilm,
Yeah,
but it is not as serious an affair as the West End Games was because the Star Wars role playing game isn't technically canon universe. It is kind of a mixing, a blurring of the lines of legends and canon, all mixed
yeah,
into one sort of weird unit. It's really strange, and so
yeah.
unlike West End Games, who was able to like set a lot of precedent in the Star Wars universe in the past, and like so far as naming names and defining planets and places and stuff like that that
Hmm.
have gone on that other people like Dave Filoni have taken up and actually reintroduced into the canon universe. Um, Fantasy Flight Games doesn't have any of that sort of leeway. They just kind of have to take what materials out there and systemize it, which I think
Yeah,
is kind of it's unfortunate.
yeah, no, I agree. And like they have to do different timelines. Like there's Age of Empire, Age of Rebellion,
Right,
and so on that they're doing. And I've looked through them. I have not been really impressed. Like I got really excited about Wizards of the Coast's D20 version, and that was willing to go really dark. Like the Dark
yeah,
Side source book and so on. All of those were like, I mean, in a strange way, granted, this should come from the company that was also carrying the torch for Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I mean, you almost felt the evil coming off the page,
right.
and I really like that. And
Yeah,
I don't feel that with the new one.
and that was one thing that they didn't do so much in the West End games because they had a system in there where you collected too many dark side points, your character was effectively dead in sense of the story, and it turned into an NPC that the storyteller would take over. So really, you'd only be able to play dark side characters if you were the game master.
That's funny. That I wasn't aware of that. That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
Oh man. Well, I'm glad it got a re-release. I mean, it looks beautiful, and the D6 system's fine. You can still rock that if you want to actually
Yeah,
play it. Play it. Shit.
it's still my favorite system for Star Wars, and even with the lacking of the dark side, which you could always customize the game
Yeah.
to disregard those rules and play dark sided characters. I know
Yeah. Yeah.
people who have done that. It's fine. You can
Right.
break the rules whenever you want. That's the beauty of role playing games.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So all right, well, why don't we let this segue right into the fan production of the month, which you're also going to take the lead on here, Robin, because
Yeah,
it's
well,
related
it
to
is related. Yeah.
yeah.
So, several years ago, before this 30th anniversary was announced and they were going to be doing this, there were many diehard adherents of the Star Wars D6 system. And in fact, I think it was because of what I'm about to show you that this 30th anniversary was a financially viable product.
Aha.
Because what happened was people made their own update of the Star Wars
Whoa.
role playing game. Yeah, and so this is, I mean, just look at the huge book. I'll show you
Holy shit.
comparison. This is the original rule book, and this is the fan edition. So they essentially took, whatever it was. This is more than about 15 years worth of Star Wars role playing game material and condensed it into a single volume, and there's so much here. I mean, like this literally, you could take this book and it's everything you would ever need to play the game.
That is so. What did they Kickstarter or
No,
Indiegogo
no,
or
no.
something?
And this is and you'll love this. It was an underground project. Nobody has their names attached to it because they didn't want to get sued.
Uh-huh. We're looking at a
So
physical book for those that are just listening to the audio. It's a
right, right.
physical, huge fucking book.
Well, I'll
Okay.
explain how that came about too, because it's kind of you kind of have to do it on the down low. So there's no store that you can go to and buy this book, and I'll get
Okay.
into that. So yeah, there's this group, and they called themselves Womp Rat Press, which is kind of play on both, the Star Wars little creatures from Tatooine and a play on the West End Games name.
Right.
And so, and they've got their logo down here, which looks very similar to the old West End Games logo. But yeah, Womp Rat Press. And so, they decided, the original the West End Games role playing had three editions essentially. There was the first edition, which they re-released there for the 30th anniversary, and then there was a second edition, and then they did kind of a quasi third edition that they called revised and expanded. And so
Okay.
this is called revised, expanded, and update, or also known as re-up.
Re-up. Okay.
Re-up, yeah. So that's kind of like the official name of this project was re-up, and they did two editions of it, and the second edition was pretty much they nailed it. It's perfect, and they haven't had to update it since. And it's got like I said, it's just got a ton of material in here. It's got all that stuff that you would want from the source books and sort of vehicle stats and ship stats,
Oh.
and NPC stats and character just a ton and ton of character templates
So
in
how
the
do you get
back.
it?
So
How?
okay, so here's the thing: is that it was kind of initially circulated on a Google Plus group. There's a Star Wars D6 Google Plus group,
Okay.
and in there you can get the files. And we've got the links to this Google Drive resource that's got the files in it.
All
And
right. I was
so
going to
you
say, I mean, just posting it on Google Plus is like pretty much the highest end encryption that you could ever put on something because nobody's going to look. So, that's great.
But
Okay.
yeah, but even the people that uploaded to the Google Plus weren't the ones who created this. Like this is still like a Womp Rat Press is still a mysterious group. Nobody knows who they are. They're just an anonymous group, and this is the only way it could have gotten done, because otherwise, like I said, Disney or whoever probably would have sued them out of existence. But it was
Right.
one of those things that they worked on in secret and then published it, and it just appeared out of the blue. And it was like by then it was on the internet and it was too late and nobody could do anything about it, which is
Wow.
yeah, it's really cool. So it
It's
was
like when
really
Phil
kind of,
Zimmerman was uploading PGP.
yeah. So it's very much like these people that love Star Wars but were kind of thumbing their nose at the IP, which is just
Sure.
great.
That's brilliant. I love it.
So on that link, I've linked to the specific folder where you can find re-up, and there's an ebook edition which is smaller, but there's also two print editions that you can download,
Nah.
both in color and black and white. And what you can do is take those files along with, they have a bunch of different cover designs. Even one, this is a cover design of my own making. I didn't make the art,
Beautiful.
but I
Yeah.
put this cover together and then uploaded, and you can get this in that folder too. There's a folder just full of cover images. So anyways, you take those files, the print edition PDF and a cover file, and you can upload those to lulu.com
Oh
and print
yeah.
your own book. And I don't know if they still have the same deal going on, but it was like if your first book you order is half off. So I ended up only paying about, I think it was like $35-40 for this, which is a freaking steal.
That is a steal. That is priceless, frankly.
Yeah, it is. And it's
Whoa.
over 500 pages
Oh,
of Star Wars RPG content.
oh,
And it's just amazing.
that's the revolution right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I knew you would like that.
That is genius. I don't know why I never really thought about that, but that has my mind going in all kinds of crazy places right now. That is beautiful that you shared that. I love this. I am definitely going to get my own copy as well.
Cool.
Yeah, brilliant. All right. Well, anything else to add on that? Otherwise, we got a question of the month to get into here.
Yeah, no, I definitely, even if you don't plan on playing the game, just go and check out the ebook edition. It's really cool. I mean,
Well,
this is
download it and decentralize the spread of information. Okay, folks.
right. Yeah, share it with your friends at the
Yeah.
very least.
So that link is in the show notes, and I definitely recommend everybody download it. Fantastic. So, all right. Well, that I did not see that coming. I did not know what that was, and I love being surprised like that because I think that is so fucking rebellious, and I don't mean that as a pun, like, but that is genuinely rebellious. I love it. All right. Well, let's get into our question of the month, which I think fits with a lot of the latter half of our conversation in the September Star Wars update, that being about gaming and Star Wars. And my question of the month that I posited for September is the top 8 video games, so specifically video games, Star Wars video games of all time. And there are a lot of Star Wars video games. And even before Disney took over and ended up releasing a whole bunch of bullshit, there were already quite a few Star Wars video games that you could do, easily a top 20 list if you wanted to. But we're going to do, as is a Sovereign Tech tradition, we'll do a top 8 because really there's no reason to do top 10 or top 20. You can just pick any number out of a hat, and I've always chosen 8. That might have something to do with Kabbalah, but I won't talk about that now. So, but anyway, so for our top 8, we'll break them down 8, and we actually have these. Rob and I both have these in order. Number 8 is obviously still great, but it's the lower end of the bar. And then number 1 will be considered the best Star Wars game of all time by our choosing. Now, kind of what inspired this, there's another podcast on the Collider Jedi Council feed now called Rule of Two, and they were talking about this. And I like the guys there fine, especially in Rule of Two, but I thought their list was so asinine and so completely like out of touch that I said, no, I have to resolve this in my own little way. And so that's part of why I asked this question. But first, let me ask you, before we get to number 8, let me ask you, Robin, I mean, was this a tough thing for you to write out? No. Yeah. Same here.
No, I mean, yeah, I know what I like when it comes to Star Wars video games, and it's going to become real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, and in fact, I think as much as I think most people would feel that these lists are probably going to be pretty close to each other, I think there might be some pretty vast differences. I think number 1 might be the same. I'm just going to venture it. But and knowing me and me knowing Rob, I mean, I think number 1's going to be the same. But I think other than that, there could be a lot of diversity here.
Yeah.
Because there's one series that I know I didn't put a single game from in that I think a lot of people would probably find crazy, but that's okay because I'm sure Robin will put it in. So yeah, I didn't have a hard time with this either. I knew very quickly, I could have done a top 20 in no time as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we'll start off with number 8, and I'll start this one off. And what we'll do is we'll go back and forth with our number 8s, and because we're over the hour mark, we'll try and keep this kind of brief, but this is so much fun, how can you? So but anyway, with my number 8, I think this is going to surprise people, so we'll start off with a shocker. My number 8 is actually Rebel Assault 2, which was a game that came out mainly at first for PC, then it ended up coming out for PlayStation 1 with actually some added scenes and everything. Rebel Assault 2, 90s game, looks like a 90s game, plays like Wing Commander. It's an interactive movie more than anything else. I mean, with full motion video, the whole thing. It has a badass, like kind of the villain of the game is actually a starfighter, which is a trend, or an Imperial starfighter. That is kind of a trend in a lot of LucasArts games at the time, that like, oh, the Empire has this new weapon or whatever, and it's this new kind of TIE fighter. In this case, it was the TIE Phantom, which was a TIE fighter. It had 3 wings, but they were single wings. It wasn't like the TIE Defender where it's like a full solar panel. And it could cloak. That was the big deal. It could cloak. I think it could even fire while cloaked. I love this game because I still to this day love that kind of full motion video 90s gaming style, because it felt like an interactive movie and I felt like I was in Star Wars. when I played this. And you get to do everything. You get to fly something that's effectively the Millennium Falcon. You get to fly a TIE fighter. You get to fly all these different kinds of ships and really get to take in the Star Wars universe at a grander scale that I can only think of a couple games that would even touch. As far as being any grander. This was really a big game. The other beautiful thing about it is that, at least, I don't know how it would work with the PlayStation 1 version, but for the computer version, had a ton of Easter eggs in it where you could put in cheat codes. And like, there was this is one of the best reasons, I'm sure somebody's got a video of it on YouTube, is there's an alternative subtitle track for the game where it's all like, it's just hilarious. Like, they just turned it into a comedy. And there's a point where like Admiral Akbar is giving, like a briefing in aboard a rebel carrier. And he's saying what the Rebel Alliance needs is boots, good boots, the kind of boots that your mother used to make. Just like all this ridiculous, it's just like, it created replay value just by turning the game kind of into a comedy. And at the time there wasn't a whole lot of Star Wars comedy. So I don't think this game gets enough credit. I know a lot of people didn't like it, and you beat it inside of 2 hours, but I thought it was fucking brilliant. Like, I beat it the day that I got it, but I just thought it was so much fun to do that as well. So that's my number 8. Robin, if you want to go to yours, or if you have comments on Rebel.
Yeah. Well, knowing Brian, I was not at all surprised that this was on his list. The only surprise is that it wasn't higher on his list.
It could have been.
Yeah, I imagine that. Yeah. It's not on my list, but I did enjoy the game. My biggest criticism is, as you mentioned, you can finish it in a day. It's too short.
Yeah, very short. At a time when games were not known for being that short. Quite the opposite. Is where like Wing Commander, you'd take you at least 10, 12 hours. This was kind of crazy. Yeah.
So my number 8 pick is kind of a pure nostalgia pick, sure. But it also has a couple of notable distinctions. In that, for one, it was the first Star Wars video game, which was the 1983 Star Wars arcade game.
The vector graphics.
Yes, the vector graphics where you're flying an X-Wing on the Death Star run. And it had, full voice with Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it was really quite a revolutionary game for its time. And honestly, I would say up until the early 90s, with some of the games on PC and the Super Nintendo, it was probably the greatest Star Wars game for that 10-year period.
Yeah.
There were some other, like, honestly, like the Star Wars video games that were on the Atari, and even some of the ones on the original NES system were kind of weird and oddballish and just not that great.
Yeah, they're like, especially on the NES, they're pretty basic platformers, like too basic.
Yeah, and I think there was even one, like a Star Wars video game where you fight Darth Vader and he turns into a scorpion. It was like, what the hell is that?
Right. and Lightsaber Battle never got officially released for Atari, and that was pretty much, I mean, that was just air hockey anyway. So
right, exactly. Yeah. So and that really stuck in my mind, because they had a Star Wars arcade stand up in the pizzeria that I used to go to as a kid. And that was always the thing I looked forward to, playing Star Wars just as much, if not more, than getting pizza.
Yeah, right. Hell yeah, man. Yeah, no, that vector graphics style is still so cool. I mean,
oh yeah. In fact, somebody put out a T-shirt of the vector graphics Star Wars video game that I have, and it's cool. It's one of my favorite shirts.
Yeah. That game would actually go on to inspire a Star Trek game that was vector graphics. That was really fucking cool.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was awesome. Taking on Klingon ships and everything. That was great.
Right.
Great pick for number 8. Definitely deserves to be in this list. And maybe the first successful like movie to game transition to ever be done. And one of the rare ones that was actually great. Like I said, it's still playable to this day, in my opinion. In fact, I remember the 32X re-release that was pretty cool too.
Yep.
So, all right, well, let's move on to number 7. Number 7 on my list is Shadows of the Empire. This was released for N64 and PC. The PC version had improved graphics as well as some extra levels and so on. So I recommend playing that one, and it is available on GOG.com actually. This game is, I mean, first, it's very much the first time, because on Atari and on the NES, they really tried to capture the snowspeeder scene in Empire Strikes Back, where you're doing the tow cables and taking on the the AT-ATs and everything. This is the game that finally captured it. That finally gave you that excitement of doing that. And that alone is enough. But like, taking on Boba Fett with jetpacks, getting wampas and so much in this game was really cool. But what really made it magical for me was that it was part of that Shadows of the Empire multimedia event where you had the comic books, you had the soundtrack, you had the book, you had the making of, you had all these different things. And it gave you the preview into the character of Dash Rendar, who I know some people want to say is a Han Solo clone. I get it, but I liked it. And also getting to fly around in the Outrider was pretty cool in the game as well. So yeah, Shadows of the Empire, I think it is a milestone in Star Wars gaming because it did finally capture a lot of, shall we say, fifis that we've had. And I think that makes it very worthwhile. And again, the story overall, I really liked it. And again, the version is far better, but totally playable today.
Well, you bring up a really great point. It's kind of a milestone just in media period, because I think it was the first successful implementation of a transmedia campaign where you did have a series of interrelated products all linked together across a spectrum of different media, such as books and comic books and video games and, audio and just all this stuff. And now that's a big thing for everybody to do. So for them to do this back in the early 90s, way, way, way ahead of its time.
Yeah, and it worked because I really think this game sold a lot of N64s.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
Mario 64 is great, no doubt about that. But this sold a lot of N64s. So yeah. But anyway, so you're number 7.
So my number 7 is the original Dark Forces, which was essentially a kind of a Doom clone, but in the Star Wars universe. But it actually had some upgraded, technical aspects, and that they were able to do a few things that were actually in true 3D. Whereas I don't know if people know this, but Doom isn't true 3D.
Right.
But whereas in Dark Forces, like when the Moldy Crow comes down, that's actually a fully true 3D ship. So it was really cool. It was they were they didn't just make a Star Wars Doom clone. They pushed the technology, and the story was great. It was their first introduction to the character of Kyle Katarn, who is still beloved to this very day.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, even like John Carmack and Romero, like they both admit, like they've been quoted as saying, "Wow, Dark Forces did it." Like they perfected, in a very real way, this game perfected the first-person shooter formula,
right?
Which was just how damned good LucasArts was at things, and they would do that a lot actually, because I think they perfected the Wing Commander formula as well. But
yeah, it was one of those games, kind of like Wing Commander, where they were able to prove the model of yes, you can tell stories in video games.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even in first person shooters, which are known for just, being sort of like, shoot them up and kill everything. No, they had, an actual good story,
right.
With the development of the Dark Troopers and stuff like that. And it was really cool.
Yeah, the Dark Troopers were so cool. Though I'll tell you, level 3 with that fucking Dianaga, I hate that fucking level.
The sewer level
on that level. That is the worst. Great pick. Very important game in gaming history, not just Star Wars. I mean, and getting Kyle Katarn, that was pretty badass. So all right, if you're ready, we'll go on to number 6.
Okay.
And my number 6 is, I mentioned with Rebel Assault 2 that there's only a couple games that ever went on a grander scale, I think, than Rebel Assault 2. Well, one that did was actually Rogue Leader, which is Rogue Squadron 2. This was one of the launch titles for the GameCube, which Nintendo saw the success of launching the N64 Shadows of the Empire. They figured, well, let's have another Star Wars game at launch. And this game definitely sold a ton of GameCubes. It's what got me to buy one. Because I still think it's just one of the most beautiful fucking games ever made, Star Wars or not. It's stunning in its presentation. Factor 5 knew exactly what they were doing with this. It would have a sequel. It'd end up with a Rogue Squadron 3. But I think Rogue Squadron 2, just in what it could deliver, the raw beauty of the game and the size and everything that you got to do in it, running around. I mean, because like Rogue Squadron, the first one, which also came out on N64, was great. But Rogue Squadron 2, the fact that you could actually like really traverse the universe more and it didn't feel so contained as Rogue Squadron did, just took everything to another level. And I, as far as like a, well, I'm not going to say it's the best pure Star Wars flying game out there, but it's right up there. In just and also you get to do some other things in it too, not just flying. But anyway, a lot of fun for that game. And if you use some of the codes for it, you get to go around in like that, like the 68 Buick or something, and it's tons of fun to just take out TIE fighters in the 68 Buick, ice hanging and everything. I love that. So yeah, just a tremendous flying or flight sim, I guess you could say. So yeah. So there's my number. Was that number 6? Yeah, that was my number 6.
And your 6 makes a pretty good counterpart to my number 6.
Okay.
Which starts out what is, in my opinion, the best series of Star Wars games that has ever been or ever will be, and that's X-Wing, the original X-Wing, which I still have a sealed copy of.
That's beautiful. It's right on the video there, folks. Yeah, I remember that box all too well.
Yeah, 1993. This is as much as I think Rogue Squadron and Shadows of the Empire sold consoles, X-Wing sold a lot of PCs.
Yeah, and its collector's edition would definitely sell a lot of CD-ROM drives, which were not common.
Yes. And if you were lucky enough to buy one when it first came out and get one of the, quote, special editions, it came with this really nice extra booklet that was an instruction booklet, but actually told the backstory of the character of Kean Firelander, who you play in the game.
Right.
And it is chock full of just all kinds of really cool Star Wars lore. In fact, this booklet, I think, in many ways takes a huge page from West End Games, and I think they were inspired by that. And it's kind of interesting to look through it because they talk about stuff in that book that is that ended up getting retconned later on. And so far as information about the Twi'leks and stuff like that. Yeah, there's and I think that they talked about the Emperor before he was known as the Chancellor. They talked about him being an elected official and stuff like that. And it's a really interesting piece of Star Wars history to see how the canon universe sort of evolved back in the day, which of course we now know as Legends. But this was the first game where, aside from, like I said, the original Star Wars arcade game, where you actually got to sit in the cockpit of an X-wing, and are really kind of like the first fully immersive experience where you have control over every aspect of that ship. You could change the level at which your laser cannons recharge, or how fast your ship was going, or recharge your shields after they've been depleted. Yeah, your rear shields and aft shields, and there were varying levels of which you could set that to.
Yeah, and you could number keys, and you could literally be looking out different windows of your cockpit. I mean,
right, and you could even change the S-foil position to open or closed, and having them closed, your ship would go a little bit faster. I mean, this was just really just kind of like they really thought out every possible aspect of the X-Wing and systemized it, which was just super cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think if you buy the game on GOG.com, that you get that book that you mentioned of the Firelander guy.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let this slip, but I was the one that scanned that and uploaded it to the internet.
Yes.
So the reason GOG has that is because I scanned it, uploaded it, and pointed GOG to say, hey, you're missing something in your little extra documents here. You might want to put this in.
I love it. Thank you for your service, sir. Yeah, that's brilliant. The X-Wing game, the first one, like this is, again, they perfected the Wing Commander formula. I love Wing Commander. I really love Wing Commander. And happy birthday to Mark Hamill, who of course, would end up popularizing the character of Colonel Maverick Blair, Christopher Blair. And his birthday was 2 days ago, I think. Mm-hmm. 23rd or whatever. Anyway, but yeah, like Wing Commander, the thing with Wing Commanders, I always felt like I was flying a desk, like I didn't get the feeling of forward momentum. but in
Right.
X-Wing, you get the feeling of forward momentum. Part of that, I mean, just the polygon, like it really was immersive. Not just and part of that also, I think that allowed for the forward momentum is again the granular controls that you had of your starfighter. That was just so cool. So yeah,
Right. They had full throttle controls,
right.
where you could, uh, all the way from 0 to 100.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. Um, all right. Well, I mean, yeah, the importance of X-Wing cannot be understated. But let's go to number 5. So
Okay.
number 5 is kind of a weird pick for me. I mean, it's not a weird pick for me, but I think it's kind of a weird pick, and it's a game that unfortunately I think gets forgotten because it only ever got released for one system, never got a PC release, and I really wish it would. I wish somebody would get it out, like GOG or someone would get it out there. But it's Racer Revenge, and this was only for the PlayStation 2. It's a sequel to Star Wars Racer, or Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, which of course is a pod racing game. Racer Revenge is also a pod racing game. I think it took everything that was in Racer and just brought it up to 13. And it's a beautiful game. Totally took advantage of the PlayStation 2's graphical abilities. And there's a lot more levels. There's a lot more depth to it than, I mean, Racer was a great game. That's another game that sold a lot of N64s. Okay. And that you can get on PC as well. But Racer Revenge, I just think is 2 times the game, and just
Yeah.
so gorgeous. I have like a modded PS2, and part of the reason I have that is just to play Racer Revenge because I just love that game so much.
Nice.
So yeah, a great game that gets forgotten, but I think it perfected its own formula. It took and really there's never been another. I don't know why there's never been another racer game. Pod racing is one of the few things most Star Wars fans agree are great about the prequels. And yeah, I'd like to see it continue, or at least have this get a re-release. So there's
Yeah.
number 5.
That's, you bring up a really good point because that video game was one of the few times that I got pretty miffed being a, part of the PC Master Race and being left out.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose you could play on an emulator now, but
Right. But it's nothing like paying it back in the day when it first came out. I mean,
right.
you can't match that feeling.
Yeah. I mean, it was such a brilliant game. It just didn't get enough push, and it didn't. If it came out on more systems, I think it would be remembered more. But most people, I've talked to very few people that have played it.
Yeah, it would
So
have been nice if they had at least gotten like an Xbox release.
because I don't even think they've like the PS4, they released a ton of PS2 games for that. I don't even think it's been re-released for that. It's such a shame. So anyway, yeah, there's my number 5.
Okay, for my number 5, I have somewhat continuing but skipping over in the Jedi Knight Dark Forces series. We have Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast,
Aha.
which was I think did they put that on consoles too?
Yeah, it came to one of them, or no,
Yeah.
it came out on GameCube and Xbox.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I played it on the PC, which was really kind of the native platform.
Yeah, and the multiplayer for that is
right. Just still
to.
to this day, probably the best implementation of multiplayer, lightsaber fights. And I'll put that even above the modern Battlefront games, which I mean, they're okay, but this really kind of they nailed it more than I think anybody was ever expecting. Because for they did other lightsaber games and they did okay, but people were just like, there was a feeling at the time that there's just no way you can do good lightsaber combat in a video game, and this proved that they could.
Yeah. This was so the multiplayer, I mean, the single player was great too, but the multiplayer was really where this was at. I mean, like, I think that this game, made it. It's not on my list, and I'll tell you the reason why it's not on my list, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a Jedi Knight game that isn't. The reason it's not on my list is in the multiplayer, there's this one, because you could pick up these items and some of them would be weapons, like you get thermal detonators or something.
Right.
There was a blaster that you could mount, not that you carried, that you mounted and you could place like on a bridge or something.
Yes.
If you got that damn thing, you owned. I mean,
cleaned up. Yep.
Like it was like a super weapon. And
yeah.
I felt like you just all you wanted to do was just make sure you got that. And the multiplayer aspect of that game turned into that for me. Now I know there's a lot of mods for this, and some of them have actually resolved that because they
Right.
recognize that was such a problem. But that's my only critique of the game. Otherwise it's a perfect game,
Yeah.
and it absolutely deserves its spot.
And it kind of says, I mean, I don't want to speak for Brian, but I think it says a lot that both he and I remember it for its multiplayer because we're not big multiplayer game people.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, but this was just that good. And I agree with you about the lightsaber mechanics and everything. I mean, just fantastic. So, all right, well, let's rock on to number 4. I'm actually kind of curious if this is going to make your number 4 as well. But this is Battlefront 2. Now, I don't mean the new one. Battlefront 2 it ended up getting out on everything, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. And this is another one where the multiplayer was really the strength here. I mean, there's a good game in it. It's in and of itself. But when you brought somebody over and you started rocking that shit, I mean, because this went beyond what Jedi Knight gave you a lot of great abilities as far as multiplayer. This opened up everything that wasn't in Jedi Knight. I think it opened up and put it into a multiplayer game. But admittedly, the lightsaber battles are not as good, or the lightsaber abilities in Battlefront 2 are nowhere near as good as the Jedi Knight series. But it's serviceable, it's there, and you just have so much fun playing it. And this has got to be one of the most longest played games in history, because there's still a huge community that plays it. There's still servers out there for it, and there's so many mods for it. I mean, it's really like people just love this fucking game, and I think for very good reason. So there's my that's my number 4.
Okay, and actually Battlefront 2 is not in my list.
Wow.
But it almost made it. It
All
did.
right, sure.
Yeah. I unfortunately I did not play a whole lot of it back in the day because I didn't, for whatever reason, I don't remember. I didn't play it until years after it came out.
Sure.
And by then, sort of like the multiplayer community wasn't as active as it was back then.
Right.
But yeah, no.
Or go ahead.
Yeah, no, I recognize that today there are still a lot of people who are really into it and still keep it alive, especially with the monumental turds that the EA Battlefront games are.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing, is that I think the game is almost more popular now just because subsequent Star Wars games since then have been shit.
And you have to do some work to get it to work multiplayer these days because the servers that they provided are long gone.
Oh, yeah. Which is always a problem with certain implementations of multiplayer. So, and there was supposed to be a Battlefront 3. This is a very popular game in its day, but that ended up getting canceled when they switched over to EA. And gee, look how well that turned out. But anyway, you're
okay. Number 4, we are continuing with the greatest Star Wars game series ever, and we have X-Wing Alliance.
Man, you got the original game boxes.
Yes, I do. Yeah. I've actually got several copies of this game, unsurprisingly. Sure. I mean, this really just is my favorite Star Wars, like almost my favorite video game series of all video games.
Yeah,
and
wouldn't argue.
A lot of people sort of like, kind of ding X-Wing Alliance for being sort of somewhat inferior to TIE Fighter in terms of just the way it played. But really, I think a lot of people underestimate it. And the story is it's so good. This is another one of those games where, LucasArts really just showed how good they are in delivering story. Yeah, and it ties into the events of Return of the Jedi.
Right.
And you play as basically, you start out as sort of like this independently family-run business.
Right.
And you get implicated in some sort of illegal, affair, and the Empire comes in and takes over your family's home base and everything, and you basically the family is blown to the four winds and they have to split up and run away. And it really is a family story, and it's really cool. And one of the things they introduced into this game, which is really kind of here again ahead of its time, was they actually had an in-game email system.
Yes.
Where different characters in the game would email you.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really cool. I mean, and the ability to fly a YT-1300 like that in that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And was a real stand.
And it wasn't the first time that you got to do the second Death Star run, because they had an arcade game, a Return of the Jedi arcade game where you did that. But X-Wing Alliance was it was the real thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that like 84 or 86, I think it was when that Return of the Jedi arcade
Right.
game came out, was so tough because you do the Death Star run with the Millennium Falcon, but like you have to move the Falcon to the left, to the right, to the left, to the
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, even the level, I mean, basically the game only had two levels. It had the Endor Force level
Right.
and the Death Star run with the Millennium Falcon. And
Yeah.
just getting past the Endor Force was such a bitch. It
Yeah.
was so hard.
You come down and like, what the hell? No, I hear you. Yeah, X-Wing Alliance, great game. It's not on my list, but I think it's a beautiful, beautiful game. I really wish that series could have continued. Of course,
Yeah.
when X-Wing Alliance would come out, that's pretty much right around when episode 1 would hit. And at that point, George Lucas himself put a moratorium on LucasArts, saying no more games that take place during the original trilogy. We're only going to make prequel games.
Right. Which fortunately they reversed their decision on that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I do have to mention a couple of things about both X-Wing and X-Wing Alliance.
Yeah.
You can get X-Wing, both of these games, like I said, on GOG. But outside of GOG, there's a group of fans who have upgraded the graphics on X-Wing Alliance.
Yeah.
It's called the X-Wing Alliance Upgrade Project.
Right.
And I wouldn't say they've updated to where it looks like a modern game, but it's certainly a huge improvement on the models and the textures of the ships that were in the original base game.
Yeah, and screenshots. It's pretty. It's very pretty.
Yeah. And also with the original X-Wing game, there's another group of fans who are they're recreating the original X-Wing game in the Unity engine, and it's called X-Wing VM, and it's not finished yet, but I actually am fortunate enough to be in the beta, and it's looking really good.
Nice. Yeah, this is the best thing about PC games is you can keep modding them and updating them.
Right.
I mean, it's really, it shows the strength of that platform. All right, well, I guess now we're in the top 3, and this is where all the magic happens. So, in the top 3, my number 3 is not one that I need to say much about, but Super Empire Strikes Back, which came out for the Super Nintendo. And the entire trilogy came out for the Super Nintendo. You had Super Star Wars, which was just too fucking difficult and such a pain in the ass. And you almost never actually got to use the lightsaber in it, which made it kind of pointless. And then you had Super Return of the Jedi, which allowed you to play different characters besides Luke, because Luke is definitely the main character in all 3 of these games for the Super Nintendo. But when you're Luke in Return of the Jedi, you can only use the lightsaber. He doesn't have a blaster anymore. So that's what made Super Empire Strikes Back so cool for me. Was, first off, it's a beautiful game. For 16-bit graphics, it is just stunning, and you get to do a whole lot. I mean, as far as like riding tauntauns, there's some times where you get to riding ships and so on. But the fact that Luke has the lightsaber and the blaster just puts it over the top for me as far as these very well done platformers go. For the Super Nintendo. I mean, it really is a pretty good trilogy, but Super Empire Strikes Back stands out just really a cut above. And a lot of the force abilities that were actually invented for the game would end up getting implemented in Jedi Knight and would end up even really becoming canon, within the movies themselves and so on. But they were really original ideas from this game. I love it. I could play this game endlessly. It's so much fun. It's hard, but it's so much fun.
Yeah, all those Super NES platformers were pretty hard, but not like sort of like punishingly hard like we talked about with the Return of the Jedi arcade game.
I like that.
I'll tell you,
games.
like I didn't get the Super Nintendo when it first came out, but I had a friend that had it, and he got Super Empire Strikes Back the day it came out, and he told me to come over and we'd play the game together. And I'll tell you, the first thing that blew me away about that game was the implementation of the soundtrack.
Yeah,
it was just amazing.
Very well.
And the fact that they took my favorite piece of Star Wars music, the asteroid scene from Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, they looped it.
Yeah, and that's at the beginning of the game, and it totally blew my mind. And that was, I think, one of the first times where it said it was a long time between that original arcade game and before we got some good Star Wars games again. And this was one of them where it's like, wow, it's like Star Wars games are cool again.
Yeah. And this one really put it over the top.
It did.
Yeah. Super Empire Strikes Back, just amazing. So your number 3?
My number 3 is probably not going to be a surprise really to anybody. That's Knights of the Old Republic. And I really I don't have to say much about it.
Yeah.
If you haven't played it yet and you're a Star Wars fan, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Go
Yeah.
out and buy it right now.
The story
It
of Darth Revan is
Yeah,
everything.
I mean, just that they created a whole new, basically a whole new Star Wars universe that takes
Right.
place thousands of years before the original trilogy, and it opened everybody's minds to what was possible in the Star Wars universe, and it was just such a great story. And I'll tell you, this kind of comes back into the tabletop role playing game. Knights of the Old Republic was the first time that I had sat down on any computer game and actually felt like I was involved in what was something that was anywhere close to being a tabletop role playing game in
Yeah.
terms of the
Right.
depth of the story and the characters, the voice acting and everything. It was just that good.
Yeah. Now that was BioWare, right? That put this together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that really kind of what, was their claim to fame. It may really kind of, launch their career.
Yeah, yeah. I love this game, and I still, especially with mods, Knights of the Old Republic 2 is great as well. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but Knights of the Old Republic, that first one, yeah, I mean, that was just I played it on the original Xbox actually, and I was just blown away. And I mean, and you really get immersed. I will admit, I think that what BioWare learned in that, there's actually a game called Jade Empire. It has nothing to do with,
Oh yeah.
but they talk about perfection. Like they took, so the thing, like, because actually that series Knights of the Old Republic didn't make it on my list, and the part of the reason is that I think Jade Empire is just is Knights of the Old Republic just taken to that one little extra level where it's like, damn, that's a great game, and I mean they're both great games, but yeah.
Yeah, I have a hard time arguing with that. I will say just the one thing that separates it is sort of like the fighting mechanics, where it was kind of like not quite quick time events, but where you were kind of like it was almost like a fighting game within an RPG.
Yeah, that's fair. Yep, yeah, that's a good point. So, but yeah, great pick. For that was your number 3, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, check out both of those, Knights of the Old Republic and Jade Empire. I think they're both worthwhile. Okay, number 2. We're getting there. Number 2 is Jedi Academy. This is Jedi Knight 3, pretty much. We mentioned Jedi Knight 2 earlier, Jedi Outcast. This is effectively Jedi Knight 3. The beauty with this, I don't think the lightsaber mechanics weren't like a dramatic improvement over Jedi Knight 2 at all. The multiplayer was amazing. The different styles of lightsabers that you got to use were amazing. You got to take advantage of the double-bladed lightsaber, holding
Right.
2 lightsabers, the single lightsaber. That was really cool. But the single-player game is also very standout in this. Now, you're not Kyle Katarn in this one around, but Kyle's in it. But you play an apprentice of sorts, and kind of in the new Jedi Order, and you get to go evil, and that's what made it so cool for me. And at the end, the character that you're playing at the end of it, after you kill your best friend and you're standing on the bridge of a star destroyer just staring out at this planet getting ready to bombard it, I remember playing that, and actually on the original Xbox at that time, and I pretty much shit myself. I was like, this is what I wanted. I get, like, okay, I get, it was perfect. In fact, my best friend at the time was sitting next to me right when in the game the character kills the best friend. I'm like, dude, I'm so sorry. I'm like, but this is just beautiful. Much to be so fucking evil. It's wonderful. Like you think, because so many games would tease this, where you'd get to the end and the villain would say, no, you join me, and so on. And of course, there's a classic scene in Empire Strikes Back where Vader is saying, Luke, join me, and we'll rule as father and son and all that. And you never, usually the storyline takes over and you don't get to make the actual fucking choice. This lets you make the choice. I mean, Knights of the Old Republic would do that too, where you could kind of, where you could choose to be evil, but you got to make the choice. And then, man, you start hacking and slashing everybody around there. And it's lucky that Luke made it out alive. And then, like I said, the whole game, if you choose the dark side, ends off with you on the bridge of the Star Destroyer. Fucking perfect. That's what I wanted out of Star Wars for so long. But the multiplayer mechanics, I mean, I got to tell you, at a previous tech company that I worked at, we were local area networking the shit out of that game. I mean, and they added so many abilities into it from what was available in Jedi Knight 2. I love this game. It is just one of the best. It almost could have taken number 1, but but it couldn't do number one. So
I'm glad you got this game on the list because I almost wanted to stick this in as an addendum to Jedi Knight 2.
yeah.
Because really, I mean, like it is kind of it is its own separate game, but like back in the day, we really would have considered it an expansion pack.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So, but I mean, yeah, it is a great game in its own right. So yeah, no argument there. I still like the storyline of Jedi Knight 2 just a little bit more, just because I like Kyle Katarn so much.
Yeah, he is
but yeah, the fact that you could go evil was a cool aspect of it.
Yeah, I love that. So, all right, well, you're number 2.
Okay, Jedi number 2 is the original Jedi Knight game, which was actually a sequel to Dark Forces, which was my number 7 pick. But this game was revolutionary in its own right too, because it was I think it was the first first person full 3D Star Wars shooter that you got.
Yes.
And the thing that really amazed me about this game was that up until this point, a lot of first person shooters during those days felt very claustrophobic because you were always they were basically corridor fighters. And this game really opened up things, and you got to these just expansive outdoor levels that you didn't really see up until then. Yeah. And I should point out that you could go evil in this game too.
That's true. Yes.
Yes. In fact, you end up at the end of the game and you're basically the new emperor.
Right. Yes, you are. Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. This game is amazing. And in fact, and this is the first time I think where you really, really felt like you were swinging a lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cool that you could go into the third person view to
right.
do that. It didn't just have to be a first person shooter. Thing for me is I always think of Mysteries of the Sith because I've always felt so hot.
Well, I do kind of have to add that in here too. I mean, to me, it's all one game. Yeah, it literally is an expansion pack. And what was cool is that, even if you like the evil ending in Jedi Knight was not, quote, the official ending. But regardless, when you got into the next game, Kyle Katarn does fall to the dark side, and you get to play as Mara Jade, which is so freaking cool. I mean, just back in the day, like how many times did you get to play a female character outside of Lara Croft?
Yeah, I think this might have even been pre-Lara Croft or at the same time. Could they be?
Yeah, I don't remember if it was before or after, but they're I think they're pretty contemporary. But it was a pretty rare thing at the time.
Yeah, no, when that purple lightsaber lights up, I mean, fuck you, Mace Windu.
Right. Yes, exactly. I was gonna bring that up too. Good point.
Yeah. That was so great. So yeah, whenever I think of that game, I always think of Mysteries of the Sith. That's my point on that. But what else you got to say about it?
Well, the other thing about Mysteries of Sith is like it was the first time I actually seen like where they upgraded the graphics in an expansion pack, because you actually got colored lighting, which is a brand new thing back. This is like something nobody else was doing at the time. Yeah. And was really just kind of added to the atmosphere of the game. And I just remember getting really deep into it. Wow, this is so cool.
And very few first person shooters had full motion video in them. And this one did.
Right. And I think really like this game and those full motion video segments were how people fell in love with the character of Kyle Katarn.
Agreed. Yeah.
And the actor who portrayed him just did such a great job, and is still like my preferred sort of rendition of him.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. Totally earning of a number 2 spot in my opinion. Absolutely.
And in fact, the full motion video was almost of such a quality that it could have been a movie. It was up there.
Yeah, no, it looked good. I mean, it looked really good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we go on to number 1?
Let's do it. We both know what it is.
I knew we'd both have the same one.
Oh, of course. Duh.
There's no doubt that it's TIE Fighter, Star Wars TIE Fighter. And Rob's holding up the box. Go ahead and say something, Rob, so the video shows it.
Yeah, it's so I still have, like I said, again, this is my favorite series, and this is my favorite game in the series is the original TIE Fighter. There we go. Got rid of the glare. Yeah, this is one of my prized possessions, is still having a sealed copy of this game.
Oh man, this, I mean, when you pop it in, the music hits, you hear that opening Star Wars, and then it stops. and in comes the Imperial March.
Yes.
And you're just like, whoa, wait a minute. And then you're seeing, Admiral Thrawn on
Yep.
on the Star Destroyer, and you're just like, holy fuck.
Yeah. And the Emperor, I mean, you get the Emperor, you get Darth Vader, you get Grand Admiral Thrawn, all just in the opening of the game. It's almost too much.
Yeah. So it perfected the formula of what X-Wing initially delivered. I mean, like, there's so much more that you can do within this. There's so much to say about this game, and I know we've talked about it multiple times before, as far as what makes it so great.
Both Brian and I agree. This is a reason to own a PC in any form.
Yeah, I've cracked the joke that years ago I said that you might as well not call them computers, just call them TIE fighter machines.
Right.
It's not a computer if it can't play TIE fighter, and that's all it needs to do anyway. It's that great of a game. It can easily take the spot of just being the greatest game ever, not just Star Wars.
Yes, I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the first game that I wanted to live, that I wanted to, be fuck. I would think about it after the fact, it would bleed into my real life,
right.
That I thought of myself as that TIE fighter pilot, and fuck, it still does. And yeah. It's so cool. And part of the reason that it could do that, not only was it a great flight sim, okay, in that it felt like you were really flying at those accelerated speeds and so on. Not only you get the really cool TIE Defender, which is fortunately canon now, thanks to Dave Filoni and Star Wars Rebels, which is still probably the best Star Wars ship ever, at least in my opinion. But when you go for the briefings, what made it unique from X-Wing was that there was like the secret secondary missions that you could do, and there was a character that you could join the secret order. And the cool thing with X-Wing is that X-Wing came up with the idea of achievements before achievements would be a gleam in anyone's eye at Microsoft. And the achievement, you get medals and everything, and in this you wouldn't just get medals, you got tattoos.
Right. That was the thing, is the like achievements these days, they're almost like an out of game thing.
Yeah, right.
And this is in game. You like you said, you got the tattoos, and you got the medals, and you got the badges of achievement, and there were even when you got the stuff, there were animated sequences where they showed you getting these things, and they have award ceremonies. And then for the Secret Order, the Empire, they had these secret cabal meetings where all these guys in cloaks were standing around you in the circle, and the guy puts his hands up and he does the force lightning thing, and it goes onto your arm, and it does the tattoo onto your arm with the force lightning. So freaking cool.
Exactly. It was brilliant. I mean, and it's such simple storytelling, but done within the game. I don't know. It just came together. And because so much of it was your view, not just first person shooter, but really your view, that you were living it. And oh man. There's and the graphics were great for the time, no doubt about that. The music's phenomenal. I mean, it's a perfect game for its day, and it still looks great today, in my opinion. The controls are so solid. Complex.
It really is the pinnacle of this series that started with X-Wing.
Yeah, and we'd get, there'd be a sequel to that. X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, right?
Right. Which was really just kind of a multiplayer sort of thing until they released an expansion pack.
Yeah.
That added sort of a story to it, but it wasn't really as good as a full X-Wing game.
Right.
I think it was called Balance of Power.
Balance of Power, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and X-Wing and TIE Fighter, those two games separately, would also get expansion packs, but most people, I think a lot of people played them as the collector's CD-ROMs that had it all together.
Yes.
So they never experienced that, but the add-ons were great if you were playing them in that fashion.
And the nice thing about buying the digital copies of this game today is that you get every version of this game that was ever released, because there are important distinctions between them. There's the DOS version of the game,
right,
which unfortunately only included up to the first expansion pack, the Defender of the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't get the last expansion pack because that was included in the collector's CD-ROM.
Right.
And the other thing that they took out of the collector's CD-ROM is they added in a CD soundtrack.
Yes.
The original game used what they called the iMuse system.
Right.
and the music actually changed according to what was going on in the battle in the game at that time. So it was dynamic, that it was the music changed to fit what your actions were in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Just a brilliant fucking game. I mean, and like I said, it can just, for me, in fact, maybe it does. Like, it pretty much takes the title of just the greatest game ever because, I mean, I never wanted to leave, you know. I mean, and it's so cool. I still play it. I put it on every machine I ever buy.
Yeah.
And it was the first, yeah, again, it was the first game where I felt like it was like a lifestyle game, and it wasn't
Yeah.
planned that way. But just they did such a great job at LucasArts, like you felt it. And there were other things like kind of like you mentioned about the Farlander papers and everything from X-Wing. They did that for this as well.
The Steel Chronicles.
The Steel Chronicles.
Yeah. And I have another thing to bring up in regard to this game too, is that I don't know if they have this on Steam, but I'm absolutely sure it's on GOG, and that's where I recommend you to go get it. But they included the strategy guide for the game, and this is no ordinary strategy guide. And I've still got my physical copy here of the strategy guide.
Thing.
Yeah, it is a hefty book. I mean, yeah, I let's see how many pages. Yeah, there's close to 500 pages in the strategy guide. It is a beefy strategy guide. And I'll tell you why it is so important. Is that they told the story of the game as an actual novel. This is a strategy guide and a novel, and they're actually like where they're telling stories that you don't actually get in the game itself, but are relayed in the strategy guide, and you get added depth to what is going on behind the scenes.
Right. Yeah, that it's so amazing. And you know, I mean, this is, if there are fans of the Empire out there, I guarantee you this made half of them.
Oh yeah, I've talked to people that are in the 501st cosplay organization.
Yep.
And all the guys that play TIE Fighter, most of them are TIE Fighter pilots because of this game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is what made them fall in love with the Empire and being a TIE Fighter pilot.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny because you'd say, well, how can you enjoy doing this and everything? Well, you know, it kind of sells you on the notion. I mean, there's the cool factor of being evil, but and that is a very real thing and a wonderful thing. But it does kind of sell you on the idea, you know, maybe the rebels are a bunch of fucking terrorists. In fact, I was listening to there's a great courses series that they have on Audible. There's one called Sci-Fi, and it's SCIPHI. So it's science fiction and philosophy. It's taught by a guy, I think his name's David K. Johnson. And he talks about Rogue One, like it's very modern. And he says, you tell me, in this movie, are those terrorists or aren't they?
Right.
You know, talking about the rebels. And it's a fair point to bring up. I've even heard like some Ayn Rand people saying that actually the Empire are the good guys. Like they've made that case where like
there's been
governors and all that. That's actually a more free system.
The Empire did nothing wrong meme.
Yeah, something like that. Right. Yeah. Falls in line with kind of Magneto was right.
Right.
Oh fuck yeah, I knew this was going to be your number one. You knew it was going to be mine. I mean, it is the game. And this was the injustice, is that what inspired me to ask this question, I don't know that this even made the list, like on this very popular Star Wars podcast.
Yep.
And
you know what,
that's crazy.
It is. And you know, like whenever people do these lists, and it seems like, you know, every person who has a Star Wars oriented YouTube channel has done at one point a top 10 Star Wars video games. And my measure of whether or not I can take them seriously is whether or not they have this game in their list.
Yeah.
And in fact,
top three.
In fact, for many, many years, TIE Fighter stayed on PC Gamer's top 100 best games ever list. And when it fell off, I stopped reading that magazine.
Yeah. I mean, there's just some games that look, they're evergreen. You don't, and for their legend alone, you hold on to them. You don't take them off the fucking list. Like imagine a list of great platformers that doesn't have Super Mario Brothers on there. Are you fucking crazy? You know, I don't care how many new platformers come out. They're not Super Mario Brothers. And you know, this game, I guarantee you also sold a shit ton of PCs in its day, and some pretty advanced ones too. But
the difference being is this, you know, there are dozens of Super Mario games now.
Right.
And there's no more TIE Fighters. And that's a tragedy.
That is a tragedy. Even a remastered version would be welcome. There is some weird fear that the gaming industry has over doing flight sims. I don't understand it because there's like that, and it's made by like one guy. There's the Evacron games. Uh,
Yeah. Hmm.
that are phenomenal. I totally
Yeah.
recommend buying them. I think they're only on Steam, unfortunately, but I totally recommend buying them. They're great. Talk about
The other
granular controls.
the
Uh,
other one I recommend is Elite Dangerous.
yeah. Oh, okay. Well, there's that one. Yeah, like that was a big deal when that got re-released. But in general, there is this weird fear of these flight simulators because no one. I mean, they're great games. No one will make another Free Space.
Yeah.
No one will make I mean, you go down the list of them. I mean, I know Chris.
Well, that's what I was going to say next. Is I think it's unfortunate that I think Star Citizen has ended up going to do a disservice to the genre
Yeah,
with
yeah,
all the shit that's going on with it.
right. But why are only the indies, making this stuff? Like it's all
Yeah.
starters and indies. Where's EA? Where's fucking, take a pick of the company that should be making these, and they just refuse to. I don't
Well, I'll
understand.
tell you.
Go
Tell you
ahead.
the thing that pissed me off about the first both the Battlefront games is that they had starfighter sequences, but on PC they wouldn't implement joystick controls.
Yeah, yeah,
Like how it would have been that hard to implement those in the game. Why did you leave that out? Bunch
right.
of lazy fucks.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else that I think TIE Fighter actually X-Wing and TIE Fighter directly gave us was the Star Fox series, which is also something that
Yes.
kind of ignored. But I think Nintendo totally saw the writing on the wall. They're like, holy shit, these are amazing games. We need to make our own. And they did, and they did a great job as well. But yeah. So maybe someday we'll get something like TIE Fighter again, but
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
like I mentioned before, that there is a group of people that are working on X-Wing VM in the
Right.
Unity engine, and I keep prodding them. And there's been hints that yes, eventually the next thing they'll do is update TIE Fighter 2, and I
Yeah.
really hope that happens.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing is, holy ground, Highlander. I mean, like that,
Yeah,
you're really stepping on. I mean, you got to be careful.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
try not to mess with perfection, but at the same time, yeah, I would like to see it.
Well,
Uh,
I think it's good that they're starting out with the original X-Wing because they're kind of cutting their teeth on this game.
Agreed.
And what I've seen in the beta so far, they're doing it justice.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Well, we can hope for a future TIE Fighter. We can hope for future great Star Wars games because there were so goddamn many. And we just covered, around 16 of them or 15 of them, I guess, because we both had the same number one. But otherwise, it was a very different list.
Yeah,
I'm shocked
yeah.
that it wasn't much overlap.
I do want like I do have a lack of
Go for it.
what's that?
Did you want to do an honorable mention?
Yeah, I do want to honorable mention because like most all of my games are pretty much original trilogy games, and I don't want to give the impression that I hate the prequels. I really need to give an honorable mention to Republic Commando, which was a great game.
Yeah, genuinely great game. In fact, I mentioned that on a recent Wednesday Q&A talking about fictional languages, uh, like the Mandowa language or the Mandalorian language.
Right, right.
Actually, that would kind of lead to the novelizations from that game. I think would actually end up fortunately making that a thing. But that was a great game, and the novelizations that were surrounded it, like 000 and others, were
Oh
phenomenal.
yeah, those are still very beloved characters, and it
Yeah,
was really cool when they showed up in the Clone Wars.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a short game, but I agree with you. A brilliant shooter, really, really great. I'll put out an honorable mention quick, and that's Jedi Power Battles, but the Dreamcast version, because the Dreamcast version had a multiplayer and it had 4-player multiplayer. Because the Dreamcast had 4 ports, but the multiplayer, the lightsaber mechanics, I mean, it was different because it was a third person view. It wasn't, or not just third person. It was a different view than what you would get in the Jedi Knight games. But lots of fun, and the characters were well balanced. Like you could be Plo Koon, you could be Mace Windu, you could be Obi-Wan, and really, really well balanced. The PlayStation version is just like this single player game that you go through, kind of a platformer with lightsabers. Not that exciting, but the Dreamcast version had the multiplayer version of that, and it was awesome. Especially if you got 4 people together, you were in for a hell of a time. So there's my honorable mention. Another game that I think a lot of people forget. Not as forgetful as Star Wars Obi-Wan for the original Xbox, but pretty forgetful.
Yeah, there's an interesting story behind Obi-Wan that was originally actually supposed to be tied into the Jedi Knight series because they used
Yeah.
the same graphics engine from the first Jedi Knight game in Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
And they actually improved the saber mechanics in that game. And like the game overall, the story was kind of weak, but
Yes.
they actually did there is a kind of a jump in iteration between Jedi Knight 1 and Jedi Knight 2, and that's Obi-Wan in terms of the saber mechanics. So I think they took some what they learned from Obi-Wan and up their game in Jedi Knight 2.
Yeah, I mean, I was a really big fan of the original Xbox, the original Xbox, and I would get the magazine and everything, and there was an issue where they called it Jedi Knight Obi-Wan. I mean, that was originally part of the plan, and they had a lot of ideas for that game that they just weren't able to implement.
Yeah, here again, like it was an Xbox exclusive, I think.
Yes, it only came
and it
out.
was originally supposed to be on PC too.
Yeah,
And I think because of budget stuff, they ended up cutting that because they thought it wasn't going to sell. They were like the company was kind of down on this product. I think they knew that the story was kind of shit to begin with, and so they just decided to try to do a cash grab on Xbox since there weren't very many Star Wars titles on the Xbox at that time. So say, we'll get some money out of this market, but it probably doesn't have legs anywhere else.
yeah. Well, they were skittish because like Episode 1 did not do well. The video game
That too, yeah.
one did not do well, and Battle for Naboo, which I actually liked, also did not do well. So I think that they weren't feeling these Episode 1 games.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
We did the top 8. What's the bottom one?
Holy shit. The bottom.
The worst Star Wars game.
I'm sure you have an answer, so I'm going to let you go and answer it, and I'm going to think for a second because there's one that comes to mind for me quickly, but I want to really think about it. But go ahead if you.
Okay, I mean, like, and this game gets bagged on a lot, and I think for good reason. I only played it once, and because I didn't have a PlayStation, and Brian will probably disagree with me, but Masters of Terrakasi was a terrible game.
I thought you were going to say like, well, when you said PlayStation, I figured it was that narrowed it.
No, yeah.
I mean, I played it a lot, but I get that it's not a great game.
This is my personal bias, and then I'm just not a big fan of beat 'em up games anyway.
Sure.
So like, I mean, I enjoyed Street Fighter 2 back in the day, but that was kind of like the extent of my enjoyment of those types of games.
Yeah, I love fighting games so much, though. Yeah, I mean, you'd think that game was like a no-brainer. Okay, we're going to take Tekken and we're going to put Star Wars characters in it, and it should have worked beautifully, and it didn't. I love that Terrakasi is like a part of Star Wars now,
right?
The fighting art, but
it was just a bad execution.
Yeah. Oh hell. So all right, so now I have to come up with mine. Boy, there was a couple stinkers on the Game Boy Advance. There was Flight of the Falcon, which
I never played that.
Yeah, that was terrible. I mean, that was really bad. And not that Game Boy Advance couldn't have done those games. Like Iridium 3D was awesome. Mm-hmm. That was really bad. I mean, I either want to say like Empire Strikes Back for the NES, or like Episode 1 was really bad. Like that.
Yeah, it was.
That was really shitty.
Yeah,
it could not have been.
I will admit, and I played that game. I think that game came out before the movie too, and that was my first hint.
Video, yeah,
yeah, that was my first hint that there was something wrong with that movie.
Something's not smelling right.
Right. And today I have more appreciation for the movie than I did back then. But yeah, that game was so terrible.
Yeah, I mean, like there's collision problems. Like, I mean,
it was a mess. It was buggy as hell.
Yeah, it was. Because that's the only game I can think of that I really never want to see a re-release of. There's no point to that. Like re-release Obi-Wan, hell, re-release Yoda stories. Go ahead, put it back out there.
I still have that on my computer.
Yeah, it's a damn fine game. I mean, it's all right.
It's better than Solitaire.
Yeah. But yeah, Episode 1, I got to give it to that. I think that's just so bad. So, all right. Well, that's a hell of a note to end off on. But we're feeling good about Star Wars overall. And even though the gaming industry needs to pick up the pace here. Yeah, I think this is the longest Star Wars update we've ever done. I think we're 2 hours plus. So, which, hey, rock and roll, baby. So anyway, Rob, you got anything else or we'll wrap this one up?
No, I really enjoyed this episode a lot. I think this is probably one of our better ones. So the fact that it was over 2 hour mark, there's good content here. I really enjoyed talking about the RPGs and video games. And some of my favorite stuff about Star Wars was in this episode.
Yeah, same here. And again, the video games or the games in general don't get enough credit for just how much they carried the torch for Star Wars and how much they helped create the Star Wars universe that people know and love, more so than George Lucas ever did. So, or not, maybe not more so, but in addition to. So anyway, all right. Well, Rob, yeah, tons of fun, man. And we'll wrap this one up. I will see all of you on the other side.